Have you ever had a close friend cross a line in your relationship? If so, what happened? She kept acquiring more cats. She couldn't afford to spay-neuter them, so they bred, and instead of finding them homes, kept them all while she continued to buy more and more cats. She was living in the basement of a small townhouse. The tiny space was about the size of 3 dorm rooms. In this space she had 1 dog, a bird, and 18 cats. She couldn't afford to feed them all. I tried to help her and get her food for the cats, but she just used my help to justify getting more cats. I made her promise to not get any more cats until all of her were spayed and neutered. She said yes, then bought 2 gray kittens. I just couldn't be friends with an animal collector. Well, after a few months I realized this dude has nothing positive to say about anything other than himself. Ever. He crossed the line though when he yelled at my girlfriend about interrupting while the men are talking. Burned that bridge in about 12 minutes after we got home. He tried to get my girlfriend at the time to break up with me so he could date her. Luckily she saw what he was doing. He and I were not friends for long after that. I was pretty torn up by that betrayal.
I sent my child to wilderness therapy and I'm not sorry. My daughter is a sociopath. Ever since she was a child she never seemed normal. She was always drawn away from us and very hostile. My partner and I lock her in her room at night to protect ourselves and to make sure she doesn't get into anything dangerous to harm us. We have caught her trying to get into our gun safe, as well as multiple attempts of grabbing knives from the kitchen to try to unalive our son. We have tried everything. We have given her love, attention, toys, heart-to-heart conversations, one-on-one hangout days, and therapy. We even admitted her to a mental hospital for a year because she kept threatening to unalive us and her little brother. Nothing had worked. Her therapist tells us everything we already do. Every other day we plan family game night like Just Dance, bingo, etc., and it always ends with my daughter threatening to unalive us in our sleep. She was soon after in a mental facility for 2 years after that, and when she came home she was somehow worse. It got to the point where I was afraid for my family's safety, especially our son. So I looked into wilderness therapy. Before anyone says it's bad, I know it's bad. I know how they treat the children there. At this point I just want my daughter gone. This family has taken enough of her abuse and I have tried to make sure it didn't get to this point. I even asked family members if they could take her in and then all declined because they are afraid of her and don't want to handle her. So I admitted her in and she leaves Monday. She is 16 and will stay there until she is 18, where she can check herself out and leave. Before anyone calls me a bad parent, understand that it's hard to have a child be a part of your life when they grab a knife from the kitchen in the middle of the night and try to unlock your door to unalive you, or when they try to drown your other child. I understand this will be hard for her. I will always love my daughter and will miss seeing her, but she needs to know that this happened because of her actions and negligence. I found my birth parents but they rejected me and now I'm blaming my aunt for pushing me into contacting them. I'm an adoptee, so when I turned 18 I went to look for my birth parents, but when I turned up at their house, they refused to speak to me and said, "What makes you think we want to know you? Go away." It was so hurtful and now I regret ever trying to speak to them. I love my family and I know it was hard for them knowing that I was hunting for my birth parents, but can you blame me for wanting to know where I came from? I spoke to my foster home and they helped me find their address. I traveled for 2 days straight with a picture of them given to me by the home, but all the while I worried about appearing without warning. Last night I got a threatening text from a random number saying you had no right to come to my parents' house. You should have had the decency to call first and now my mom is a wreck. It all started when a non-biological aunt told me that she had placed her son for adoption 38 years ago. She has always wished she hadn't given him up. She tried to get him back a couple of months after he was adopted, and she tried searching for him a few times but she hasn't found him and she always brings it up with me. I think my aunt's experience has given her this warped idea that if I were to search for my birth family and show an interest in meeting them, it would validate her yearning for her son to do the same. She told me I should look for my birth parents, and at the time, I told her I didn't want to and she responded angrily saying that I didn't know what I was saying. She has used guilt trips about my birth parents missing me and about the family I could be missing out on. My mom spoke to her several times and told her to get help and to stop dragging me into her grief, but she refused to leave it alone. She asked me, "Why are you so uninterested in finding them?" And I told her how scared I felt about them potentially rejecting me. After all, they gave me up. She would say things like, "Are you not curious about what it would feel like to see and speak to them?" About 3 months ago, before I decided to go on my trip, there was an incident that left our family in a really awkward and unsettled state. I was at lunch with my parents, sister and aunt, who couldn't help but mention the whole birth parents issue to me for the millionth time. I tried to ignore her and carry on other conversations but she kept bringing it up, and it was visibly upsetting my parents. She was asked to stop by my mom and other family members, and finally, I got so tired of her pressing the issue, that I told her that finding my birth parents wouldn't bring her son back and to leave me alone. I also said that she needs to stop linking my history with her son because she's setting herself up for more heartache and it doesn't make any sense. Of course, I reflected and ended up doing the thing I was against and I was proven right. They don't love or want me. Last night I managed to find my aunt's son, but now I'm questioning whether or not I should share his address with her. What if she rejects her the way my birth parents rejected me?
I am at a loss as to what to do with my wife's request. My wife and I have been married since 2001 and together since 1999. She is the most intelligent, thoughtful, caring, and loyal person I know. I have always considered myself fortunate to have met and married her. Even today, she is aesthetically beautiful. Men have told her this throughout our marriage. She has always shot them down. Earlier this year, she was diagnosed with uterine cancer, stage 1, and had a total hysterectomy. I was never concerned about the cancer. It was diagnosed early, dealt with quickly, and she fully recovered. I took time off work to look after her after the surgery, and all seemed well. There were some to be expected emotional instances on her part. Although I am not a passionate person, we dealt with them together. After her recovery, she insisted that we start living life to the fullest and took a 10-day trip to Europe, followed by a trip to Belize. We also have a trip to the UK and Spain/Portugal later this year. I am okay with these things, building memories and crossing bucket list adventures off our list. I also understand that these result from feeling fragile on her part. She also took up yoga, swimming, and healthy cooking classes. I was fully on board until last week. Last week she came home from work and told me she wanted a hall pass. A one-time opportunity for her to have intercourse with someone else besides me. She said that since her cancer diagnosis, her outlook on life has changed, and she doesn't want to be restricted from doing what she wants. She explained that there is this guy at her work that she has always had some attraction to. He is leaving the company, and she will never see him again. Hence, this is the perfect opportunity to sleep with someone else. She said I could say no, of course, but that she would be mad/disappointed at me for an indeterminate amount of time and that it would be confirmation of my male toxicity and insecurity. I don't consider myself toxic, and if not wanting your wife of 20+ years to have intercourse with someone else is insecure, then I guess I'm uncertain. I told her I appreciated her talking to me about this, but approval via coercion is not. I also said that I did not understand her language in describing my unknown reaction to this huge issue that could affect the rest of our marriage/life. I got up in the morning and she said that she was sorry for putting such a significant decision solely on my shoulders and that to help, she was taking the decision away from me. She booked a hotel near where her coworkers had a party/send-off for this guy, and she would spend the night there with him and hope that I would be here when she got back. She would answer my questions about the night after it happened but not before. She will not tell me who he is or anything about him because she knows me too well and that I will dwell and obsess over him, which would make it too real for me, which is pretty accurate. Her point of view is that the less I know, the better, which contradicts the offer to tell me anything I want to know after it happens. I think she knows I won't want to know/ask anything, or she will not tell me. Part of me thinks she has been honest with me and has been through a lot since finding out she had cancer, so maybe I should just let it happen. I do conceptually know what she went through, so I cannot dismiss how this affected her mental state/outlook. Part of me wants to put my foot down and say this will not happen and deal with those consequences when they happen. Her best friend called me callous for suggesting I wouldn't let it happen because I had no idea what she went through. I find it hard to believe that she is okay with possibly throwing away 20+ years of marriage over someone she has had no relationship with outside of work and that I should call her bluff. Maybe she thinks I won't end the marriage because of one encounter. I don't know what to do. I empathize with her, and an instant later, I am angry with her. Part of me wants to know who this guy is. What does he look like? What has he got that is so enthralling for her? Is he just a safe option? Is he married? Does his wife know? Would I be an insensitive butthole for saying no? What can I do besides walking away?
What's the darkest secret you found out about a family member relative? I found out 2 years ago that my mother had a baby she gave up for adoption 18 months before she had me and then had another baby when I was 3 and she also gave that baby up for adoption. All 3 of us have different fathers and I think the only reason she kept me was because my father married her but that marriage only lasted a year. My mother remarried when I was 5 and my half-brother was born when I was 7. As far as I knew for 59 years he and I were our mother's only children. I never saw her pregnant with the second baby because she sent me to live with my great-grandparents across the country during her pregnancy. My mother and grandmother were the only people who knew about this and they both took the secret to their graves. The only reason any of it was found out is because of all of the DNA testing people now do. This discovery really impacted my sense of identity for a while, my view of my mother, and our relationship. I've met my half-siblings, an older sister and younger brother. I like them and I'm glad I've been able to answer some of their questions but the initial discovery really messed with me for a bit.
Would I be the jerk for ignoring my grandma's attempt to reconnect? Background: I am a 34-year-old woman and my father is a terrible person. He exhibits narcissistic tendencies and I believe he may even be a sociopath. I haven't had any contact with him for about 3 years now. Roughly a year and a half ago, my mother left him after enduring his abusive behavior towards her and her dying parents. Needless to say, he's undeniably a bad person. After selling their house, my father moved in with his mother, who has consistently supported him throughout his actions, even turning away my battered and bruised mother when she sought help. Currently, he lives with his new girlfriend in a camper at his mother's place. My grandmother is an extremely religious woman. I was brought up in the Southern Baptist tradition, largely due to her influence, even though my parents were relatively indifferent to religion. However, I no longer hold the beliefs or values that I was taught. The last time I had any interaction with my grandmother was when my mom's mother passed away. At the time, my mom and I stopped by to visit before my father moved in with my grandmother. We wanted to follow societal expectations, as we were in the vicinity and it seemed appropriate to keep the peace with that side of the family, especially since we had just experienced a loss. However, my grandmother informed my mother that we could not prevent my father from attending the funeral.
In response, I made an exaggerated statement to defend my mother and shield her from unnecessary pain, considering all she had already endured. I said something along the lines of "watch me." That visit became quite hostile afterward. My grandmother essentially communicated to my mom, who had been with my father since their teenage years and considered my grandmother her own mother figure, that she wouldn't take sides but would support her son in any way she could. A few days later, she blocked my mom and me on Facebook and hasn't communicated with us since. There were a few email exchanges sent by my grandmother to my mom, but they lacked any apology and appeared to be casual greetings, devoid of genuine sentiment. This side of my family has a reputation for disregarding significant events and expecting everyone to simply move on with time. As an adult, I cannot endorse such behavior. Although my grandmother stopped talking to me after that incident, she had previously criticized my decision to end my relationship with my father, despite witnessing years of physical, verbal, and emotional abuse directed at my mom. She once even suggested to my mom that I experienced a miscarriage with my first baby because God was trying to bring me back to my father. When we were children, she repeatedly sent my brother and me back to our parents' house when we tried to escape the abusive environment. This morning, I received a text from my grandmother essentially saying that she has been thinking about me, hoping I am doing well, and expressing love while also assuring me of her prayers. I suspect she reached out today because I recently announced my pregnancy on Facebook. Although she has me blocked, she must have seen the post. While I don't necessarily desire to rekindle this relationship, I feel a sense of obligation to respond. Would I be in the wrong if I choose to ignore her message? The Revenge of the Deranged Loner. Cheyenne, not her real name, high school sophomore Cheyenne is a typical teenager who on any other day would be updating her readers on the latest Netflix series. Most would have believed her to be your average teenager that worries about her grades, doing extra credit, not texting in class, and standing out in class. She is an advanced student who tries to put forth maximum effort in the class. Her favorite subject is English and she shares that subject with her crush. She is in the newspaper, yearbook, and National Honor Society. On the outside, she was the typical teenager one would want their child to be. Deep down, she was a woman scorned. It all started one day in math class. She was chatting with her friend, we will call her Jennifer, when another classmate, we will call her Sarah, yells out loud, "Is anyone listening to me?" Sarah is somewhat of a same-age parent to the class and hates it when people act like children. She had asked Sarah for the homework and the latter did not much give the former time to answer. Sarah was derisive and sarcastic to Cheyenne. This is when it all began. Today in math class, Sarah had been given a page from the sub and, being above the grade level, finished earlier than everyone. Cheyenne wanted to know how she got a 97% on the extra credit, which Cheyenne barely passed with a 70%, and how she ended up answering all the questions that the teacher asked the class before he called on anybody. Sarah could not help but be just a little bit sassy to Cheyenne now. Math was not Cheyenne's favorite subject. She knew how to do the work, but hated how the teacher always came to her with the dumbest questions that the entire class struggled with, yet he never helped them. She really hated this, especially when being pulled out of the line to do extra credit on the board. She did not even have time to write down her work and the teacher did not even tell her where to start and started yelling at her. So with this resenting, she started her silent revenge. She had smelled a rat in the class and she knew it was Sarah. She had followed Sarah to multiple classes and even pretended to sit in her row. One day, she had her chance. She uncovered the spellbook that Sarah had been using for months with all of the class's passwords. Using the passwords and under the guise of being everyone and making the most incredibly easy extra credit, Cheyenne printed all the pages out. She knew what she had to do. The next day after school started, while Sarah was sleeping, she went into Sarah's backpack and took the entire book. She spent the next week learning the password to Sarah's social media, which was easy to learn. Next to the password, she saw Sarah's Instagram page that highlighted her recent picture. Sarah may not have been ugly, but she was average and did not garner much attention at school as she had a boyfriend. Cheyenne took this idea and ran with it. Under the name Deranged Loner, created multiple accounts that included intimate aspects of the entire school. The only class that the book did not detail was the math class. She used her math knowledge to switch out some numbers and the spellbook barely exposed what was going on in the class. She did this during lunch and erased everything that was not math related. Hacking was not a new activity to her, but she was getting pesky and decided to move on. She then started to prey on Sarah as she did not like her. One day she noticed that Sarah had made a bribe to get a peer to cheat on a math test. Cheyenne took screenshots, enlarged them, and printed them out. After failing to give Sarah the homework at the start of class, she walked around the class asking people for the homework. At the end of the class, she had nobody to give the homework to as everyone had turned in their homework before Cheyenne spoke, something the teacher did not like. Sarah took one look at Cheyenne and laughed at her. Little did she know that this was the last day she would make fun of anyone in class. Cheyenne then passed Sarah a printout that screamed extra credit with a screenshot of her bribe. This is when she realized the depths of Deranged Loner. She struggled thinking who it could be. She then started thinking that it had to be someone in a year or two above her since nobody in her class had the intelligence to pull something like this. She also never once trusted any of the other students as everyone had proven to be rotten. She was terrified as she started putting pieces of the ever-growing puzzle together. She did not know how to approach this, but she knew that she needed to confront Deranged Loner. She had an idea who it is, but she thought the worst. She sat down in the corner and started to cry. Her plan was to play shitty and cowardly to fulfill her character, and this kicked her down. She was ready to end it all. Now, Cheyenne is the second child of a single mother who had raised her by herself. When her boyfriend finally left her, she had little time to rally time for Cheyenne as she rushed to make enough money for the household. Thus, Cheyenne knew that her mother was home from work. After pretense from math class and walking home quickly, she was able to get a hold of her mother to tell her everything. The first thing she told was that if the police was called, she was the perpetrator. She told her mother everything that had happened that day and the entire week. She showed her the magic book and all the Facebook accounts. Lastly, she showed her the blackmail she had. Her mother closed her door and after a couple of minutes, she told Cheyenne that everything will be alright and that they would face this problem together. She called her daughter a hero and after she hung up the phone, she yelled to the window, "I hate that grade A troublemaker." She rushed over to the window to make sure that her daughter was out of the building. Her daughter then realized the power of social media and was proud of her daughter finally finding her calling. She went to the closet and pulled out what looked to be an old VCR and a dusty box of tapes. She selected one and placed it inside the VCR. In the tape was what looked to be high school yearbook and started to record it. What followed every VCR recording that Cheyenne ever watched. After about 10 minutes, what looked like a new yearbook was sitting on the desk. The next item that was pulled out was almost 4 feet wide, 2 feet tall, and made out of cardboard. It looked to be an age-old replica that the mother and daughter rushed outside to hang on the wall. The said wall had an article from the town's newspaper of a teen sends town into chaos. The headline, however, only appeared if you left all the lights off and 3 of the 5 candles lit. Another item that followed was a stuffed mask that looked as if it was made out of an old sock and 2 antennas. The next day at school, Cheyenne was ready to face the problem. For the first time in her life, she could not wait to get to school. As per plan, she started playing Sarah, who was a coward and always played defense. She found out that the faculty knew that the spell book had been stolen, but did not know who the culprit was. She then stated that she already knew who it was, but did not want to risk arresting the wrong person. She then in an obvious tone said that it must be someone smarter than all of them and did not come right out. She then stated that the subject must get a little boring and that she was going to have one of the smartest people in school enrich the subject matter with some homemade math problems that she had made over the summer. She then handed the teacher the math problems, which she had made with the help of her family to ensure that it was incorrect. After school, she handed the teacher the math problems and he yelled at her for not doing her homework and playing super sleuth. She went home screaming, "I hate that female." At this moment the mother and daughter cried. In the chaos, the plan had set end. What's the wildest thing that's ever happened at your high school's graduation party? I hooked up with the hottest teacher in the entire school. At the start of senior year, I was a little geeky, a little being an understatement. I was very interested in girls but up until this point had my V card, as not even the belugas were down to F. Though there was one woman who I fixated on, my history teacher. Oh boy, this girl could make erectile dysfunction dad hard. Her luscious curves, and seductive lips. She always wore open-toed shoes and caught me a few times admiring her perfectly manicured toes. I had no chance, as she was known as the dream conquest in our school and if anyone had a chance, it was Jason, the captain of the basketball team. Standing at 6'3", and built like a Greek god, Jason was the epitome of masculine looks. Rumor had it he had 20 bodies at the age of 18 but it was never confirmed. So how did I manage to sleep with my history teacher, Miss Big Booty? I completely transformed my looks of course. I was already a history nerd and since she taught history and seemed to geek out about it too, that was kind of set. It was never my intention to F Miss Big Booty by the way. The real chase was a different girl, by the name Sally Honkerson. As you can guess, Sally had honkers that stretched as far as the eye could see. I made it my mission to get with her. Using the facial gains guide to lead my way I started to hit the gym and ate right, slowly my physique developed. The guide especially helped me make my face appear more masculine, with features such as a sharper jawline, more defined cheekbones, and an optimal haircut. By the time graduation came around I had actually lost my V card. Sadly not to Sally Honkerson, but to a 6. Okay look, beggars can't be choosers. Graduation came and went and the party was held. It's a tradition for teachers to come to the party too, and I knew Miss Big Booty would be there, but my main eye was on Sally. Oh Sally Honkerson, the nights I spent furiously rubbing one out till sweat beamed down my forehead to the thought of her. It was my time to shine. Unfortunately for me, I spotted her and Jason, goddamn Jason, making out by the fruit punch bowl. Given up hope I became kinda down. But then I saw Miss Big Booty at the snack bar. I walked up with no intentions, maybe just to geek out about history with her. I was pretty intoxicated by this point, and so was she from my first words to her. She was so gone she couldn't even recall the exact time of death of the first ruler of the Ottoman Empire's cat. She was out of it. We got to talking and before I knew it, me and Miss Big Booty were making out in the disabled bathrooms. A cab was called, we went into her apartment, and she screamed Galileo with how I laid the pipe down. It was perfect, her reputation of Miss Big Booty upheld her. I even got to slobber on them toes. Edit for those asking me about the guide which aided my transformation, literally just look up facial gains guide. What is the dumbest thing you have ever done as a teenager? 1. I farted while we were spread out sitting on the ground in my gym class. Everyone looked behind towards me and I looked behind me, only to see that I was looking at a wall. 2. I tied 2x4s to my legs and ropes to my steering wheel, sat with my legs through my sunroof and tried to drive my car like a stagecoach. It worked, but the car ended up in a ditch. 3. Tried cow tipping, ended up getting kicked by a cow and got 2 broken ribs. 4. I snuck out to do teenagerly things at around midnight and got back at around 4 in the morning. I very slowly, agonizingly slowly, took my keys out of my pocket, selected the correct key, inserted it into the front door lock at a speed of 1 tumbler per fortnight, rotated it counterclockwise while palming the rest of the keys so as to not let them jingle and successfully unlocked the door. I removed the key from the lock at the same snail's pace and put my keys back in my right front pocket. I went to reach for the doorknob and rang the doorbell. That was when I died inside. 5. My friends and I used to break into very posh houses and take showers. We didn't steal anything. We just took showers. Not together or anything. Just luxury showers. 6. Walked home alone at 3 a.m. multiple times across a bridge known locally as the Stabby Bridge. 7. Got married at 18. Just don't. 8. Jumped and landed one-footed onto a banana skin to prove that the idea they are slippy as F was made up for cartoons. Nope. They really are slippy as F. 9. I saw a bear in the woods and panicked so I threw food at it. 10. Not sure if dumb or awesome but for my 18th birthday, we went around in 3 cars stealing signs cones from roadworks areas at about 3 a.m. Not enough that you'd notice but 1 or 2 pieces from each setup. Next we went and closed off part of a road, with all the proper signage and markings. It took 3 weeks before people realized no one was showing up at this roadworks area and called the transit authority to find out what was going on. A week later, it was all gone. 11. Shaved my eyebrows off for no reason whatsoever. 12. Dropped out of high school in my final year, literally and figuratively. I jumped out of a window and was expelled. 13. My friends and I threw eggs at a police car. The cops in the car saw us and started chasing us but our town was surrounded by fields so we ran and hid deep in the fields until they left. This happened around 11 p.m. Good times. We were more scared of demons in those fields than we were of the cops. Diving into adult entertainment together, I started watching porn with my husband. Over the past 6 months, a surprising fantasy has emerged within me, the desire to watch another woman pleasure my husband while I participate by holding the base of his pee-pee initially. I hope this fantasy would fade away since I've always considered myself a jealous person. However, as time went on, my longing for this experience only grew stronger. Interestingly, my husband and I began watching 2 women, 1 man adult films together, and it has been an incredibly positive and eye-opening experience. Here are the changes I've observed so far. 1. I discovered that my husband is attracted to slightly curvier women, particularly those with fuller buttocks. This revelation surprised me because I had always assumed he preferred skinny figures. I can't believe I spent 5 years of marriage without directly asking him about his preferences. It makes me realize how foolish I was. I've spent my life striving to be as small and petite as possible, thinking that's what most men desire. However, as we watched these beautiful and voluptuous women in the videos, it suddenly made sense. Their curves, skin, and bounce were undeniably sexy. Recognizing this has boosted my excitement for the dynamic of our potential threesome. If I'm the smaller woman, I will feel confident knowing that this is exactly what turns my husband on, allowing me to fully embrace my own sexiness and confidence during the experience. 2. My body confidence has skyrocketed. Watching these pornos, I noticed that the women my husband selects have imperfections like cellulite, larger tummies, and saggy breasts, yet they exude incredible sexiness. It's mind-blowing. I've been insecure about my tiny tummy and stretch marks from my pregnancy with my son for far too long. But now, I realize how insignificant these things truly are during intimacy. The same goes for the men in the videos. They might have funny pale asses, back acne, questionable haircuts, or tattoos, but none of it matters. Everything about them is incredibly sexy. Let's slather everyone in oil and get it on. Humans are inherently sexy, and for the first time, I feel included in that statement. Catching glimpses of myself in the mirror, I can't help but feel amazing. I have a tiny waist and a nice SS and honestly, it's like a revelation that I am attractive. It's like becoming a whole new person. I've wasted so much time in my life constantly effing in my tummy in public, endlessly trying on outfits to find the one that makes me look the thinnest before going out, and constantly comparing myself to others. What a terrible waste. 3. Pornography, at least the kind we've been watching, is amazing. It receives an unfairly negative reputation. It's fun and feels like a celebration of love, intimacy and the beauty of being alive and human. It's not always rough and insensitive, it can be real and playful. Sometimes it's rough, while other times it's gentle. I simply love it. By the way, our current favorite is Valentina Jules. She's an absolute Barbie and seems like such a sweetheart. If only I could convince her to join us and pleasure my husband alongside me. 4. Life is short, and we only get one chance at it. I am overflowing with excitement as I eagerly anticipate expressing my love for my husband in this unique way. I simply had to share my excitement because it has been building up inside me for the past 2 weeks. 5. Surprisingly, the jealousy that has plagued me throughout my life seems to have vanished. I've come to realize that intimacy is just intimacy, it's fun, beautiful, and a gift. Of course, it's vital to be smart, safe, and obtain consent, but beyond that, it's a remarkable experience that should be celebrated and enjoyed. Note, it's important to approach any intimate exploration with respect, open communication, and enthusiastic consent from all parties involved. My cheating wife died with her baby and lover. Now, she left me with her life insurance and I will have her ashes delivered in cheapest URN offered. At the beginning of 2022, I caught my wife having an affair with one of her exes. Our marriage wasn't perfect, I was not the perfect husband I will admit. But, I did my best. I put effort into the entire 5 years we were together. I put my all into the relationship. I could not say the same. I was forced to confront the reality of who she truly was shortly after I caught her. She illegally evicted me from our shared home, lied to the police to try and get me arrested, tried to get me fired from my job, and tried to turn all of my friends against me. Some of these succeeded, while others did not. She has made my life a living hell since the day I asked her for the divorce. She has planted her heels into the ground over our separation to try drain all my finances and emotional strength from me. The only upside is we had no kids for her to use as weapons, but I soon found out that her policy of strict birth control with me did not extend to her suitor as he got her pregnant 5 months ago. I thought maybe this would help speed along the divorce, but it only rallied her in her efforts to destroy me. On Christmas Eve, my wife and her suitor went to a party where both of them got drunk. I find this fact terrible as all her friends knew she was pregnant as well. Her suitor drove them home, a mistake that would cost them both their lives. In the state I live in, our divorce is now considered to never have even started. I will be able to claim her life insurance policy for myself and move back into my home. Her parents called me up distraught yesterday, acting as if the last year had never happened, and offered their full support to my funeral preparations for her. My confusion here was beyond belief, but the apple doesn't fall far from the tree when it comes to my wife. I told them if they wanted a funeral, it was coming out of their pockets. I will pay for her to be cremated, and deliver her ashes to them in the cheapest urn offered if they desire. They called me horribly and tried to guilt me about her life insurance, but after only 4 minutes on the phone with them, I hung up and blocked every one of her family's numbers. I'm going to be taking a few extra days off work to move back into my house over the next week. I've already made arrangements to have her stuff hauled off so my home will be an empty canvas to start my life anew. I don't know if there is a God, or if this was just karma, but I truly believe now that I have come out on the other side of the storm.
Bilinguals of Reddit, what's your they didn't know I spoke their language story? Visiting South Korea with my wife, a native of that country, I'm shaped like a lumberjack, and have a big, red lumberjack beard to match. A group of Korean women in their 50s and 60s nearby were laughing and calling me a bear, which I found hilarious. So one of the older ones says, "Gum, bear," to me as she passes by, and I start laughing. She makes that face like, did he understand what just I said? So I raise my arms and make a playful growl at her. She is horrified and starts apologizing while her friends all cover their mouths and giggle, as Korean women customarily do. I love Korea. In Quebec on a ski trip, a bus hit my dad's car while trying to park. My dad got onto the bus and started talking to the driver. The driver was quite apologetic, but when my dad started asking for his insurance information, he all of a sudden couldn't speak English. Without skipping a beat, Dad switches to interrogating the driver in French, the language he did all of his education until university. Driver was shook.
My aunt was an abusive, manipulative nut. Her daughter felt she could not cut, but when she got older, she also became bolder. Now Auntie is stuck in a sad little rut. My mom is the oldest of 4 children and gave birth to me a few months before her youngest sister, let's call her Melda, gave birth to my cousin, Rita. From the day she brought Rita home, Melda groomed my cousin to be a beauty pageant kid. She started getting Rita's hair done as soon as possible and raised Rita to only wear dresses and very dainty shoes. When I briefly lived with my aunt, she used my mom's money to provide my care and get Rita new clothes and hair. Melda had a full-time job as a grocery store cashier and received child support from Rita's father, who was in the US Air Force, but she spent thousands of dollars to ensure her daughter was always beauty pageant ready. When we got older, I was a grade level ahead of Rita. Melda made Rita compete with me academically, regardless of our class differences. We were both excellent students and lived in different states, but Melda would call my mom once a month and ask detailed questions about my report cards. If mom told her I earned all A's, Melda would implement various punishments until Rita had just as good or better grades. At first, Melda would belittle her daughter with taunts, then she would deny buying Rita any cookies, toys, etc. until her grades improved. When we started hitting our growth spurts, Melda would make Rita wear old dresses and shoes that were too small until her grades improved. Naturally, this made life difficult for me and my mom. Rita grew to resent me, and she often did petty things to get me into trouble, like breaking my grandma's doll collection, breaking dishes, and even fighting me a couple of times when I refused to be bullied. Mom stopped discussing my grades with Melda, which worked until Mom and I moved back to her hometown, where Melda lived, and enrolled in the same school as Rita. Then Melda began to volunteer at the school on report card days just to find out my grades and Rita's grades. This continued into our college years. I ended up dropping out of college after 3 semesters as I had developed a drinking problem. I had to undergo a few months of treatment. Rita was enrolled in college by this time, and Melda maintained her competition streak by calling my mom to report how well my cousin was doing before snidely pointing out that I was no longer in college. I changed phone numbers after Melda called me one day to tell me that Rita was applying for study abroad, then asked how my borderline minimum wage retail job was going. The irony was that Rita would become a 4th-year junior when I finally returned to college. More on that later. By the time I returned to college, our grandma, Mom and Melda's mom, was in a nursing home due to dementia-related problems. She had been diagnosed while we were in high school, but the disease was progressing rapidly. As the eldest child, Mom quit her job to spend every day at the nursing home, talking to Grandma, reading to Grandma, etc. Mom wanted to have Grandma return to Grandma's home, but Melda refused. Melda had secured the power of executor of the estate shortly after Grandma's diagnosis, meaning that she could place Grandma in the home despite her siblings' protests. It also meant that Melda technically owned Grandma's home and the land on which it sat. Fast forward a couple of years, Rita began dating a local pastor's son, let's call him Charming, and got engaged in April after dating for 3 months. Melda, coincidentally, was a good friend of Charming's mother. Melda wasted no time bragging to my mom about how Rita was engaged to Mary. I was graduating from college at this time, which got under Melda's skin. I still didn't talk directly to her, but I did keep up communication with my cousin. When I talked to her about the upcoming wedding, Rita revealed that Melda was planning to take Grandma off life support and use the money from Grandma's estate and insurance to pay for a lavish wedding. Rita also revealed that she did not want to marry Lucas, was fed up with college. She was a 7th-year senior, basically living the life Melda had created for her. I mentioned to my mom what Rita had said about taking Grandma off life support, and Mom was livid. She called Rita, and they crafted the revenge together. Revenge. In June, Melda decided to host a very over-the-top party to celebrate the engagement. Mom and I chose not to attend as we decided to visit Grandma in the hospital together that night. So Rita's actions were reported to me by Rita herself, but I will phrase them. Melda had organized the evening so that the parents of the engaged couple and the engaged couple could stand to tell everyone in the room how amazing their respective families were. Lucas and his parents had already gushed their praises for Melda, and it was Rita's turn. Rita thanked Melda for raising her and Charming's parents for raising such a good son and then announced that the wedding was off. She took the opportunity to tell Lucas that she did care about him but would not marry him just because it was what their families expected from soon-to-be parents. Rita then left the party and spent the night with one of her friends from high school. This humiliated Melda on a personal and financial level. She had already paid non-refundable deposits for a caterer, wedding reception hall, dress, limo, etc., and she was out of hundreds of dollars. Furthermore, Melda and Charming's parents were very against premarital intimacy, which made Rita's unexpected announcement even more appalling. Melda had planned to keep the pregnancy as hidden as possible with the dress she had selected, the floral arrangement, etc., and Rita was expected to remain complicit. She called Rita and raged at her several times, but Rita stood her ground. She returned the car Melda had bought for her and informed Melda that she was also dropping out of college, which would leave Melda thousands of dollars in debt on student loans. Their drama took a backseat when Grandma passed away in early August. By then, Rita had gotten a job in a corporate office, and showed up to the funeral looking very happy and pregnant. After the funeral, we had a reception. Melda called Mom, me, Rita, my uncle, and another aunt into a room together to announce that she would sell Grandma's house and land and split up Grandma's life insurance policy money as she saw fit. It was the expected announcement from her, and she phrased it as something Grandma would have wanted. I don't know who was smiling bigger, Mom or Rita, when they announced they were contesting her power as a state executor. As Grandma's diagnosis of dementia had been announced just days before Melda secured her position, Mom had consulted a lawyer to contest the decisions Melda had made. Mom and Melda went to court, and the matter was resolved less than a year later. Melda's position as executor of the estate was overruled due to Grandma's mental capacity. This meant that she received no money directly outside of a life insurance policy Melda had taken on Grandma. Rita is paying off her student loans, but Melda is still paying off other debts from living beyond her means. Mom agreed to let Rita and her daughter move into Grandma's old house, and she and Lucas are co-parenting.
What is the most incredible coincidence you've ever experienced? When I was 18, I lived in a small town called Ridgecrest that was a good 5-hour drive from where I ended up moving years later. While in Ridgecrest, I worked part-time at the local movie theater. That's where I met Mike. Mike was another teenager who worked concessions. We hit it off right away thanks to our shared love of video games and bad horror movies. We'd often hang out after work to play Halo or watch some cheesy slasher flick that we'd make fun of. Mike had an awesome sense of humor and was just so easy to get along with. Outside of work, we spent a ton of time just chilling at his place gaming or driving around blasting music. He was a great friend during that period of my life when everything felt transitional and uncertain. I never had a brother, but Mike filled that role for me. When I was 19, a family emergency happened that forced me to suddenly relocate across the state. In the abrupt move, I lost contact with Mike. This was before cell phones or social media really took off. And honestly, I was so distracted dealing with everything that I didn't even think to get his number or last name. Over the next decade, I thought of Mike a lot and the fun times we shared. But with no way to contact him, he became just another piece of my past. I had no idea what happened to him after I left town so suddenly. Flash forward 11 years later. I'm 30 now, living in San Diego and working an office job. At this job, we carpool to save gas money. One evening my carpool buddy says his roommate needs to borrow the car for the night after we're off work. No problem, I say. When my shift ends, we walk out to the parking lot to switch off the car. My buddy opens the back door to let his roommate inside. I turn around to say hello and there sitting in the backseat is Mike, my old friend from Ridgecrest. I was flabbergasted. Neither of us could believe it. The chances were just astronomical that not only would we cross paths again, but become roommates and coworkers in a city hundreds of miles from our hometown. We excitedly caught up on the long drive home and it was like no time had passed. We effortlessly picked up that brotherly friendship we shared as teenagers. Mike ended up being the best man at my wedding and is godfather to my kids now. Looking back, it's absolutely crazy how life brought us back together in such an unexpected way. Mike is still my best friend to this day. Even when you lose touch, somehow true friends have a way of finding their way back. I'm so grateful to have reconnected with that goofball from my past all those years later. It just shows you never know what life has in store. I saw my daughter make Barbie get railed by Ken. I haven't told my husband yet because he will not believe what I saw. I have a 6-year-old daughter. She likes to play with dolls. Mostly, the stuff is basically mimicry of me and my husband and what we do around her. Nothing problematic in nature. Until today when I asked her to come to the kitchen to get some snacks. She is usually busy with playing in the afternoon. I went to her room. She was on the floor playing with dolls. One of her Ken dolls was effing one of the Barbie dolls from behind. I was shocked, I couldn't move after watching that scene. Before I knew anything she changed position and Barbie was on top. I asked my daughter about it finally without my husband because it has been eating me. I did not berate her. I was showing as if I am curious to what she was doing because I never saw her play out like that. I asked her what she was playing this afternoon. She said she was playing with dolls. I described what I saw and asked her what she was doing to those dolls. She told me she was making Ken and Barbie wrestle. I asked her where she see this kind of wrestling. She told me she saw me and my husband doing it 2 times. Sometimes when she would wake up to use the restroom and then he saw my husband and me wrestling naked on our bed. The bed is opposite to the door. So, it is difficult to see who is there. Also, when me and my husband are doing it, we do not care much about the surroundings. Sometimes when we are really into the mood, he would forget to lock the doors, so she must have seen my husband and I going at it. We are always careful, and yes, my husband is a really big fan of dirty talking and degradation. I left out the things that she said while making her dolls do naked wrestling. So, the one who exposed my baby to intimacy is me. This is great. I did text my husband to come home ASAP. I talked to him on the phone about this. He was also concerned. That's what I know for now. Am I the a-hole for being mad at my best friend? Story time. I'm a second year at my university. I have specific dorming accommodations through my school's disability program that require a lot of doctor's notes, letters, and emails. Freshman year, my original plan was to dorm with my best friend. We had it all planned out, a vision. Didn't work out the way I planned. I wasn't allowed to pick my roommate because of the nature of my accommodations. I wound up getting stuck with this girl who was just really a slob. Would never clean up after herself, would constantly let the mess trickle into our common area. Not to mention the passive aggressiveness every time I tried to bring it up in conversation. I couldn't take it anymore. I knew I couldn't. Conveniently, my best friend didn't like her roommate either. So we agreed that we would be roommates that following year. It took us a long time to go through all of the paperwork involved, and it wasn't a good part of my life either. A lot of things were complicated for me back at home. But, still, we promised to be roommates, so I pushed through. After months of back and forth between the disabilities office and my school's resident office, during the worst semester of my life, I finally got the accommodation. I was joyous. So was she. We talked the whole summer about living together, even made little lists of things that we would do together. It was fun. I was excited things were finally starting to go right for me. She had spoken once or twice about switching schools or majors, but was never serious about it. One day, she dropped the ball on me out of the blue. Told me that she was going to be dropping out of school and transferring somewhere across the country. Said she felt that was right. I knew her parents had been putting some pressure on her to find a different school, but she never let it get to her before. I was confused, even now. I wanted to be angry with her, but I couldn't do it. With only weeks left until move-in day now, I thought to myself, I'm unable to find a new roommate or even get to know one before the semester starts. She said there was a chance that we could still live together, and while I was hopeful, even then I was also conflicted. I went through so much, jumped through so many hurdles just to live together. I couldn't help but feel torn between wanting to be happy for my best friend and feeling betrayed at her completely disregarding the difficult housing process I now had to navigate completely alone as a disabled person, this time without the privilege of meeting my roommate before I moved in with them. It's been months now and I miss her, but this arrangement put a strain on our relationship. The distance didn't help. I'm lost and unsure of where to go. I miss my best friend.
My cheating husband had a threesome with my best friend and his girl best friend, and I got so angry I hooked up with his boss and now I regret it. My brother had to have surgery and I wanted to be there for him, so I ended up staying about 2 weeks. I always knew my best friend had a thing for my husband, she's admitted it multiple times, but I would just laugh it off because surely my married best friend won't F my husband, right? I didn't even catch them. My husband's girl best friend is just so insane that she casually admitted it to me as I was cleaning the kitchen when I got back. I thought she was kidding. She was not. I asked my best friend if this was true over a phone call and she at first denied it, then broke down sobbing and effing admitted to it. I was so angry I threw all of my husband's things into a big suitcase and tossed it on the front lawn. I locked the doors and piled a bunch of things in front of it like the couch, an end table, etc. so the dumb F couldn't get in. Of course when he got home from work and couldn't get in, he started panicking. He banged on the door and shouted for me to let him in. I just stayed upstairs with our dog and let him tire himself out. Eventually he left, and from what I know, he stayed the night at his girl best friend's horrible apartment. They probably F'd all while he was crying over me. Dumb SS. After a few weeks of him blowing up my phone and pleading with me, I finally let him come home and we talked. He was sobbing and apologizing to me. He said he was an intimacy addict and that he needed help. I told him I want him to go to therapy as well as us going to couples counseling. He agreed to it without any fight. He slept on the couch while I slept in our bedroom. My best friend hadn't even made any moves to contact me or apologize for being the homewrecker she is. My husband ended up having some sort of work dinner party a week later that he needed to attend and invited me. This was the first time he's ever invited me to anything like this. Pretty sure it's because none of his female coworkers know he's married. Or I'm assuming that's the case because of how shocked they seemed to meet me. At the dinner, his boss was chatting with me. He's newly divorced and I asked him how that was, made sure to ask loud enough for my husband to hear me. We ended up chatting all night and my husband ended up scurrying off from the dinner table and told me he was gonna go home. He told me to get an Uber home, clearly pissed off at me. Needless to say, his boss was shocked at how he treated me and I couldn't help but play up the sad lonely wife bit. It ultimately ended up in us going back to his house and hooking up. When I woke up that morning, I did end up Ubering home. Since then, his boss has sent flowers to our home and called me a few times. My husband is completely aware of this, and now the regret is starting to sink in. The guilt and worry has started to eat away at me. The revenge felt nice, but now it's clear it's eating at the both of us. I'm gonna find a lawyer and start the divorce process soon. Update: we started the divorce process and he moved out, reluctantly may I add. He moved in with his girl best friend, now fiancé actually, and they're expecting a baby. His girl best friend's parents found out what she did, and let's just say it's not going well. I also told my best friend's husband everything. He didn't believe me at first, but after I started showing him all the texts, photos, etc., he just broke down. He kicked her out and she showed up with her stuff, thinking I'd let her move in. Long story short, I had to call the cops to get her off my property. I haven't kept in contact with the boss, honestly. He bought me a few gifts, but I politely told him no. He was pretty nice about being rejected and told me it was worth a shot. I have found out many things since the process began. My husband was the cigarette of the office, being passed around by all of his female co-workers. No wonder they were shocked he was married. Do you know how many apologies I've received? I'll be set for a lifetime of apologies. But I mean seriously, why does an office have that much intimacy?
What is a scientific fact that absolutely blows your mind? Slime molds don't have brains or nervous systems but somehow retain information and use it to make decisions. Even more crazy is that they can fuse with another individual and share the information. The human body has at least 150 billion neurons. Approximately 99.85% of all the mass in the solar system is concentrated in the sun. If you put one of every animal in a bag and then pick one out, you have a 1/5 chance in picking a beetle. There are 8 times as many atoms in a teaspoonful of water as there are teaspoonfuls of water in the Atlantic Ocean. Dinosaurs lived on the other side of the galaxy from where we are now. If two pieces of the same type of metal touch in space, they will bond and be permanently stuck together. Space welding, cold welding.
How did you handle your psycho ex? He threatened me and the law didn't protect me. My older brother did. He started by stealing my prescription medication and refusing to give it back until I got back together with him. He harassed me at work for over an hour. He knew there were no other employees in the store. He called my cell endlessly until I blocked him. Then he started calling my job's phone. Threatened to come in and cause a scene to get me fired once a manager arrived if I didn't speak to him. I had no way of blocking him, and if I didn't answer the phone, the computer would log a missed call. So after the 30th call or so, I just kept picking it up and hanging it up straight away rather than talking to him. Was too scared to call the cops. He threatened to end his life if I didn't get back together with him. I asked if he was serious. He said yes. So I finally worked up the courage to call the police on him. They took him to the hospital. He was there for 3 hours. They decided it was a panic attack and released him. The harassment continued as soon as he was out. He endlessly harassed my friends. Lied to them, and would message them in the middle of the night. Send them hundreds of messages a day. He threatened me, if I ever see you with anyone else, you won't be so pretty anymore. And the guy is gonna regret talking to you. He talked bad about me to anyone that would listen. Lie about why we broke up. Called me anything he could think of. Did the same on social media. I told my grandmom and she had him delete the posts. He called me once he found out I made a Tinder, used his friend's phone to call me, and was literally screaming at me. He ended up punching a hole in his wall or cutting himself. I don't know. He had different stories for how it happened, if it even happened at all. One night he announced he was coming over to my place, relayed the message through a friend. He knew my dad's work schedule and knew I would be home alone. Luckily I was staying over a friend's house that night. I had to call him and tell him to leave me alone. A few days later, he said he was coming over again. He knew my dad's work schedule and knew I would be home alone. And I was. Unfortunately, he announced he was on his way over, and that we were going to talk it out and do what it takes to get back together. With all his previous behavior, this terrified me. I started having a severe panic attack. I told him to leave me alone. I didn't want to talk to him. We weren't getting back together. He said he didn't care, was coming over anyway. Even when I was crying hysterically, barely able to breathe from my panic attack, he insisted that since he is my favorite food, I'll be fine. I got in my car and bolted. I sat in a grocery store parking lot cause I was so scared he'd find me if I went to a friend's or a relative's. I called my mom. Once I calmed down enough, I went to a police station and got a temporary restraining order. In court, the judge decided I didn't qualify for a permanent restraining order even though he admitted to all his behavior and it qualified as domestic abuse on multiple levels. The lack of physical violence means I don't qualify for a permanent restraining order. So essentially he needs to hit me before I can prevent him from hitting me. So proud of our legal system. 3 days after court he messaged me again. I decided that I had had enough of this, so I finally called my older brother Jed, who was a Marine. I hadn't told him yet because he was away and I didn't want him to do something that would get him in trouble. When Jed heard all of this, he told that he would handle it. I never once got another message from my ex. I have no idea what Jed did, all he will tell me is that he and some of his Marine friends paid him a visit.
Have you ever been backstabbed? 16 years ago, I made a friend one day on the bus. Up until about a year ago, I considered this guy a member of my family. Let's call this guy Joel. So, I keep a crystal bowl on the mantle above my fireplace, full of my medical grass. I started noticing that after poker night, my bowl seemed a lot emptier than it should. So I set up a camera, to see which one of my guests was helping themselves when my back was turned. Next poker night, once everyone is gone, I pull up the video. There Joel was, plain as day, stuffing like $60 worth of my medication into his pocket. I sent him the video, and told him he had to return my medication, or pay for it, and I told him that if he chose to do neither, he should no longer consider me a friend. He denied it. Even with the video staring him in the face, he said he hadn't taken anything. He even had the nerve to act offended by the fact that I accused him. So I decided to ruin his life. Over the years, he had told me a lot of things he didn't want his wife to know. Affairs, shady stuff he did with their joint funds, substance issues, terrible things he said about her, her mother, and her sister. I went back through all of our messages and took screenshots of every secret he had ever said to me. There were over 70 pictures. I sent her the screenshots. Here are some examples of the kind of stuff that was in the screenshots. He admitted to cheating on her with 8 different women over the course of our friendship. Taking money they were saving for a car, and using it to buy hardcore substances. The fact that he was continuing to abuse substances, after he promised her he was clean and sober. Some of the things he said about her and her family. She's a vile, disgusting woman, and the reason they never do the deed is that he can't stand the smell. He also said he was pretty sure she was forcing herself onto her niece. He said that all of her friends only pretend to like her so they can buy substances off her. He said he wanted to get one of his side chicks pregnant, because he'd always resented his wife for being infertile. The wife's sister is insane according to him. Her sister abuses her kids. This is not true, but he said it. Her sister is faking her autoimmune disease for attention. Her mom is a lazy cow who doesn't actually need to be in a wheelchair, she just likes not having to stand up or bathe herself. She filed for divorce, and reported him to the police for the substances he had in their house. While he was doing his 8 months in jail for the grass he stole from me, his boss filled his position, and he lost his job. His now ex-wife won't let him in her house. Now he lives in a car, and showers at truck stops. I found out about the aftermath in parts. Some came from his ex-wife. She told me about the divorce, kicking him out, and getting him arrested.
What is your accidentally caught your spouse cheating horror story? 2 weeks ago I sent a message to a mutual friend asking to borrow a router. He didn't answer, but no worries, he lives nearby. I'll just stop by and grab it. I pull up to his house and start heading down the driveway. He has a long country driveway, so it's a few seconds before I see my car. I drive a company vehicle during the day. Already there. My heart began to sink, but they are friends, and business partners, maybe it's nothing. I got out of my van and look up to see the other guy shirtless in his bedroom. At this point my heart is down on my stomach and I am visibly shaking. I go in and immediately head upstairs. He is alone, now clothed. I say I came to borrow the router. Also, have you seen my wife? The car is here. He then proceeds to give the worst improv I've ever heard. Huh? No, she was here at some point though. Whatever, I knew she was there, I just wanted him to admit it. I go down, take the router, and head back to the van where I finally encounter my wife trying to sneak around the side of his house.
I don't care if there's a wedding, I am not dyeing my hair. So I have a weird problem, and after I told my boyfriend, he told me this sub would be the perfect place to get help on. So I, 25, am meant to be in the bridal party of my friend Zoe's, 26, wedding in December 2024. A couple days ago, she met with me and the rest of the bridal party to discuss what the plan was for hair, makeup, dresses, etc. At first it seemed reasonable. She's going for a winter wonderland type of theme, so blue dresses, all in different shades, lined up as a gradient, with silvery accents, snowflake jewelry and soft makeup, even blue contacts for those of us without blue eyes. Last one's a bit weird, but it's no big deal to me. I've worn color contacts for Halloween. The bit that ended up being an issue for me is that Zoe requested we all get our hair dyed. A couple members of the bridal group are natural blondes, with dyed ends, and so is Zoe, but she wants to go platinum for the wedding, but the rest of us are 2 brunettes, a strawberry blonde, she wasn't blonde enough? And a redhead. I'm one of the brunettes and I'm the only one in the group who has never dyed or bleached their hair. I've considered it, but I can never stay settled on what I want to do, and I'd hate to spend money on something that I end up hating. On top of that, my mom spent from ages 5 to 13 flat ironing my hair almost every single day. It really damaged my hair. I'm almost certain it's resulted in my hair being thinner than it used to be. I know bleaching can also damage your hair, and I don't feel comfortable taking that risk yet. I told Zoe I wouldn't be able to dye my hair. She insisted it would be fine, as my hair seemed quite healthy and she would be paying for the bleaching treatments for all of us. I again said no, thanks so much, but I can't. I asked if I could just wear a wig and she said no, that wigs are cheap and unnatural, and she wants us to have our real hair bleached instead of some cheap imitation for the day. After more back and forth, She told me I should go home and think about the fact that I'm ruining her vision and that I'd be ruining the photos and wedding video that she and her fiancé, 30, will be putting together for his grandparents, 84 and 82, to view, since they won't be able to fly in from Argentina. I apologized, paid for my meal, and left. I really don't want to dye my hair, but I also don't want to ruin Zoe's picture-perfect day. I don't think I'm being difficult or wrong here, but am I?
I don't care if there's a wedding, I am not dyeing my hair. I met with Zoe yesterday afternoon and we talked things over. I pointed out a lot of things that were brought up in the comments and presented them as the concerns of me and a couple of friends of mine, and not the concerns of the millions that saw it online. Turns out, she was part of those millions. Someone sent her one of TikToks that my Reddit post was read in and she has been thinking about things. She told me she felt a little embarrassed about this all being out there online, even if nobody knew who we are, and I apologized. I explained that I really didn't have many people who weren't involved in the wedding to speak with about this, and I needed the advice. She also apologized, and said that she realizes now that the bleaching was a completely out-of-line request. She said that since she's only bleached her hair once, and because she's naturally blonde to begin with, she didn't know anything about the process for bleaching dark hair and didn't know it would be so difficult, take so long, and could cause so much damage. She said looking back knowing what she knows now, she feels like she was a huge bitch. I reassured her that she wasn't a bitch, she was just uneducated and passionate about something, and we clashed. We hugged it out, and things are good now. About the wigs, there will be none. She's scrapping the group blonde idea. I convinced her that she would stand out far better if her whole bridal party wasn't blonde and that dark hair, and red hair, would work amazingly with her winter theme. The contacts are also being scrapped unless any of us decide we want to use theme. They're a very piercing blue and kind of cool looking. About the grandparents, Zoe said Frank's family in Argentina isn't of German descent, so nothing to wonder or argue about. She was however horrified when she put all those pieces together and thought about how it looked. She had really been thinking Elsa vibes, not Aryan Nation vibes, and that embarrassed her more than the story being out there by itself. She didn't even know Nazis fled to South America after World War II. Zoe has officially messaged everyone in the bridal party to let them know about the change of plans and to apologize for the outburst and the stress this put on everyone. She's also very excited for us all to come up with a new hair/makeup look and to go dress shopping. Also, those who asked if the groomsmen were being held to the same standard, I don't know, and after finally getting this whole fiasco over with, I didn't care to ask. Zoe and I have made up and everything's fine now. Sorry if this update wasn't the crazy story everyone was looking forward to. My wedding plans were stolen by my partner's sister, she is getting married before us. My partner, 26 meters, and I, 26F, had been together for 7 years, we have been planning our wedding for about a year now. We were visiting his parents a little while ago, his sister and her fiancé were present. Sister decided to bring up wedding plans and who they did and didn't want to invite to it, what they were planning etc. My partner and I told them what we were doing for our wedding and why it works perfectly for us. They listened and left it at that. They didn't say anything else other than that's a good idea. Well, I have just found out that they intend on doing exactly what we have planned to do for our wedding down to pretty much every process. They never said anything to us, not a word. They didn't ask if it was okay to do the same thing as us. They are pushing their wedding up as well so they will be before us. I feel like that's absolute BS, and to say I am angry is really an understatement. I don't know what to do with the anger I am feeling. Is it irrational? Am I getting upset over nothing? Can I even do or say anything to them? Can I confront my partner's mom because she was the one that mentioned it to our source? I want to confront the sister, fiancé doesn't have much input with anything, and ask her why she thinks it's okay to steal our plans. How is it fair that they take what was important to me? I don't think my partner understands why it's a big deal, but I think it is. I feel like I don't want a wedding anymore. I'm so effing upset. Today I effed up by giving my son permission to beat his bully's butt. My son was born with a condition called pectus excavatum. In layman's terms, his chest is sunken in. His condition was so bad that he only had 2.5 inches between his sternum and his spine, and his heart and lungs were bruised because of it. In December, he had surgery to correct it and they put 2 nickel bars in his chest to give it space and train his bones to grow correctly. About 3 weeks after his surgery, a kid punched him and dislodged the top bar and he had to have another surgery to put the bar back in place. The kid has been through a lot. Well, the doctor cleared him for most activity last week, just no skateboarding or bike riding, but he could now lift his backpack and go hang out with friends and play pickup, non-contact sports. Unbeknownst to me, a kid in his class had been bullying him all semester. And because my son was afraid of getting hit again, he just took it. Well, the evening he was cleared he came to me and said, "Dad, I'm cleared now. A kid has been bullying me and hitting me for months. Can I kick his butt?" Well, my son isn't really a fighter. He's fought with his brothers but never anyone else, and he's always gotten his butt kicked. So I just figured he was just talking. But this is the first I had heard about the bullying and I was concerned. I could tell he was distressed about the situation, so I told him to knock the F-ker out. He just nodded and went to his room. Now, his older brother is tough sob. He had a traumatic brain injury 2 years ago and he missed a year of school, so he's in the same grade and coincidentally takes the same class. I talked to him about it and told him to handle it but don't get in trouble. He told me that the kid walks in every day and punches my son in the head. I asked him why he allowed that to happen and he said he wanted his brother to get tough and once he was tired of getting hit, he would do something about it. While I kinda agree with his thinking, I instructed him to handle it without getting in trouble. The next morning I took them both to school, then drove back home to get my younger daughter, who goes to a different school that starts later. On the way to take her to school, my wife calls me. "Have you taken XXXXX to school yet?" "Well, after you do, go pick up your son. He got in a fight." I just assumed it was my oldest son. Imagine my surprise when I walked into the school office to see my younger son with a grin from ear to ear. He was beaming. He pointed to another kid sitting in a chair holding an ice pack on his face. I warned him. I was so proud. He had walked into class, sat down, and the kid popped him in the head like always. My older son got up to intervene, and before he could, my son decked the kid with one punch. He said the kid was bawling on the floor and that it was the best day of his life. He got suspended for 3 days. I came home after a 10-hour shift to my children being neglected while my husband was sleeping. I asked him to leave the apartment. We're both on the lease technically, but I really didn't care at that point. Said he needed to leave or I'd tell the police that he failed to care for our 2 children. He got super angry with me, said it was a mistake and it wouldn't happen again. I said I didn't care, pack your crap and go stay with your dad. Needless to say, after some intense arguing, he went on a rampage, destroying stuff around the apartment. TV, dishes, mirrors. He made a complete mess of our room and living room. I just let him, I was recording everything anyways. My son came out asking what's going on and I told him to lock himself in the nursery with his sister. I didn't think he would try to do anything to them, but I've read way too many stories. I had to stop recording to call the police. I yelled at him to calm down cause the police were on the way, and all I will say is he put his hands on me and I had to fight him off. He did get arrested, and all 3 of us are relatively unharmed. I just have some light bruises on my arm. My mom is taking the kids so I can attempt to get the apartment cleaned and replace what I can afford. Sorry this isn't the happy ending you're all wanting. I felt as though it was important to update since so many of you were worried, but we are fine. My son has just been oddly quiet and I feel awful. Hopefully I can take him out for a treat or something soon when I get this mess sorted out.
I walked out of my baby shower after my mother-in-law called me a large walrus, but my husband said his mom meant well and that I needed to eliminate my easily offended mindset. Mother-in-law always made comments about my weight ever since I got pregnant. She started making more comments while low-key shaming me for what I eat. She'd give me smaller plates, portions, cups, and even spoons whenever I visited. She also buys me small-size clothes even though I'm in my 2nd trimester and those clothes don't fit. My sister-in-law decided to throw me a baby shower, and my in-laws were invited. My husband denied it when my sister offered to throw me a baby shower, so my mom refused to come after what my husband had said to my sister. My sister is infertile. My husband claims she's become obsessed with the baby simply because she bought me stuff for the baby as gifts and wanted to throw me a baby shower. My sister is a great person, and I do not doubt that she did all that because of how great she would be as an aunt. My husband kept insisting there was something wrong with her, which led to a fight between them, and he ended up calling her a possessive bitch. My mom kicked him out, and my sister cut contact with him. I got to the baby shower, and mother-in-law was in charge of serving food to the guests. All that was served was cakes and juice. I got hungry from talking, so I got up to eat some cake. The second I put my hand on the cake, mother-in-law grabbed my arm and said I'd gained enough weight already and that if I keep this up, her son would not be happy living with a large walrus. I was shocked. I didn't know how to react, especially since she had said this out loud. She looked at me in a sorry not sorry kind of way. I put the cake down, grabbed my stuff, and started walking. Her daughter stopped me, saying I couldn't leave mid-party and embarrass her like that. I told her to tell her mom to leave if she wanted me to stay, but she went off and said, "Are you crazy? She's my mom. You want me to kick her out in front of everybody?" I turned around and kept walking. I called mom to come pick me up and went home. My husband came home looking furious. He asked me to explain what I did at the baby shower and why. I mentioned what his mom did, and he ranted about how I messed this up over something minor. I told him it wasn't minor, in my opinion, since she cut me off from food and didn't let me eat when I was hungry. He said his mom meant well, and I needed to immediately eliminate this easily offended mindset before I passed it down to our son. He noted that cakes are essential foods and that this was not a good enough reason to walk out of the baby shower that his mom and sister put a ton of money, time, and effort into. He said I had hours to call and fix things, but I refused. I went to stay with my mom because he wouldn't stop pressuring me to call and apologize for what happened. He kept talking about how pissed and let down his mom and sister felt and called me ungrateful and spiteful bitch for doing what I did.
Have you ever walked into your home and known something wasn't right? What happened? We had gone on a ski trip with our 2 kids. Our alarm company called and said our alarm had gone off, and after finding out we were out of town, they notified the police. No door alarm had been tripped, but a motion detector was going off. The police found no evidence of a break-in. The alarm company called back and said the motion detector was still going off, so it must be malfunctioning and they could come look at it when we returned. We continued on our trip, and returned home a week later. From the outside everything seemed fine. We told the kids to wait in the car while we made sure everything was fine. My husband walked in with me behind. I immediately noticed that the breakfast bar was covered in some sort of brown mess. Then I realized that I had left a bowl with some apples in it and it appeared that an animal had gone to town on them. We carefully peered around the corner and saw our living room curtains in shreds, a worse brown mess on the top of our white leather couch, and a very sick frightened frantic squirrel. We quickly opened the front door and he dashed out. Evidently apples are not a regular food for squirrels. We figured out he had fallen in through the chimney. We fixed the chimney screen the very next day. We cleaned up as best we could. Our insurance adjuster said he had to come see the damage himself. They ended up paying for everything without any questions, after he saw it. He said he gets weird claims like this that turn out to be false, but this was definitely not.
Man, what's the most down bad thing you've ever done? I hired a chubby girl and a slim girl off Craigslist for a three-way. We arranged the meeting a week prior and I spent the whole week furiously rubbing one out every opportunity I got to ensure I would last as long as possible. Some of the skin had started peeling off and I went through 2 whole bottles of lotions in a single week. When the day finally arrived I buckled up my car and took my 3-hour drive to the location. I wanted to do this far away from my hometown to make sure word does not get around. I entered the house and was greeted by a god-awful sight. I wasn't expecting a palace, but I was not expecting the smell of grass and literally a trash bag filled with dope laying in the corner of the house. Nonetheless, the girls took me in, and I was kind of disappointed. In the pictures they were very attractive. In real life, they were aesthetically challenged, and the slightly chubby girl was not slightly chubby, she was big chungus. She was Rick Ross in female form. Either way, I had made it too far to back out now. I entered the bedroom and was met with a plethora of toys. Out of the bathroom comes out a random girl, a mother effing midget. Susan will be joining this session by the way, the horizontally challenged one tells me. Oh f no, I think. But then they say the magic words, we'll get baked first. Okay fine, I've always been curious about what a midget can do. We get baked and now wander back into the bedroom. We took turns on each other and let me tell you something, that midget was doing acrobatics on that mattress. It was an amazing experience in the moment, then I got blindfolded. 30 minutes later I nut. This was the best nut of my life. It ended up being so much that the chubby one actually threw up from the sheer amount of it. And she's a big girl. I know her stomach can hold a lot. After hyperventilating for the next minute the post-nut struck me like Iron Mike in his prime. I instantly became disgusted with myself. I told them to release me right now, but they refused. Instead giving me neck again. All 3 simultaneously. Another hour later, the post-nut was once again consuming me. The post-nut was an evil entity engulfing every atom of my body and I screamed about being let go. They actually did and I left the house immediately. I drove 3 hours home and went to put my wallet back. I checked it and what do you know it, while I was blindfolded one of them stole $200 from my wallet. My unhinged best friend spilled red wine on my wife's dress during our wedding. Then, she sent us her husband's grubby knickers as consolation. My fiancée Eliza doesn't like my best friend, Allie, so much. She got upset once during banter because Ailey roasted her a little too hard. Ailey's called her leapfrog for having webbed feet. One time, Eliza got out of her seat and Ailey sat down where she was sitting to show me a video on YouTube. When Eliza returned, she saw Ailey leaning next to me and was upset for the rest of the night. Also, when I said I missed swimming because I felt out of shape Ailey said, the two of us should go together with a playful punch. Eliza didn't say anything at the time but her discomfort was visible. Things came to a head though on our wedding and I think the stress of it really got to her. Ailey was getting a drink from the bar and Eliza had taken off part of her gown and was leaving our bedroom to return to our table. They bumped into each other and she had a huge red stain over her dress. Instead of apologizing, Ailey joked that Eliza was looking like Rosamund Pike in Gone Girl and fled. Eliza ran up to me in bits and pieces and she was bawling the entire evening. We're now on our honeymoon and she has said she hopes for a fresh start but feels like Ailey might have spilled her wine on purpose. She's suggesting that I cut ties with her and if I'm honest I'm not so sure I want to. She said that the honeymoon has been miserable because the memory has been swirling around in her mind and she feels like I'm going to downplay or dismiss it. I didn't realize what a shithead I'd been and I apologized profusely to Eliza and decided to phone up Ailey to confront her about the wedding incident. So I did and it didn't go well. I told her that Eliza was really hurt by the wedding dress incident, that she had been hurt by her behavior for a long time, and that if she couldn't bring herself to apologize to Eliza's face at least she should pay to get the stain removed and if she couldn't bring herself to even do that then our friendship had to stop. To say that Ailey was taken aback would be an understatement. When I mentioned that she ran towards Eliza and didn't apologize for spilling wine on her, she got really upset and started shouting that she wasn't running at her to hurl wine at her dress, she was running from her because she didn't want to talk at that moment because she feels like Eliza hates her and she doesn't know how to go about it. Her husband even phoned me, insisting that he would pay for the damage if it were less stressful for me. He and Ailey will pay for dry cleaning, whilst a condolence hamper will be sent to Eliza. Eliza and I received the condolences hamper, primarily. Soaps. Not in the sense of fragrant body lotions luxury packages, or even organic bars, just regular, run-of-the-mill soaps. 2 dispensers were faintly rose-scented but it was so mild you had to look for it. Several white soap bars didn't smell of anything it was so confusing. The only items that suggested it was a proper gift basket were a 6-pound bottle of Chardonnay and a box of Roses chocolates that looked a fair deal more effort than the cleaning equipment at the nearest pub. The weirdest item though? A pair of underpants. Not lingerie, not anything lacy or risque, just a plain pair of white pants. They were actually kind of grubby, there was a faint orange lining on them. It didn't make sense because if they were meant to be for Eliza, they were at least 6 sizes too big. And if Ailey was making a move on me, they were again around 6 sizes too big. Also, why would she choose such disgusting pants to try and seduce me? It weirded me out so much that I rang up Ailey, asking why I had soap and grubby knickers in our condolences hamper. She kept making dry remarks to her husband about a strange noise on the other end of the phone. After some disgruntled remarks, she passed the phone over. Her husband asked what was up and I explained the whole situation. He was momentarily surprised when I described the hamper as looking like the luggage of a janitor who lived under a bridge. He said it was a small package, but there should have been several luxury gifts that weren't simply sanitary items.
There was a bottle of Chardonnay, a bottle of Shiraz, one box of rose chocolates, a Lindt bar, a selection of crackers, and some assorted cheeses. Somehow, that got replaced with leftover soaps bought in bulk and his wife fronts that Ailey found hilarious to send to my wife. He was hugely apologetic and embarrassed, stating that he'd pay us the cost of the lost items. I was raging at this point, but I tried to be collected and said, right, let me talk to Ailey again please, and he got her on the line. I told her that she had the chance to make it right and she blew it, and she groaned and told me that Eliza's jealousy had crippled our friendship and she was sick of having to flatter her insecurities. I said no, you were Eliza's insecurities, and we rode for a bit. Eventually, it ended with me saying that this had been building up for a while and that her attitude had given Eliza grief for years. Ailey said none of this would be happening if Eliza knew how to take a joke, and I just told her that a joke isn't ruining her wedding dress and then sending her your husband's stinky wife fronts. I ended the call and our friendship as well.
Since I can't talk to anyone about this, I'll say it here. My life is in shambles. A couple of years ago I met the guy of my dreams, and I fell madly in love and so did he. We had it all, good jobs, future plans, we were in the middle of buying our first home, and we are both under 25. Life was amazing to say the least, but everything changed in one night. I had gotten very sick and was in and out of the hospital. My fiancé had a memorial to go to, and so he went without me. Then everything started unfolding. His little cousin was there and had tried to kiss him, and then when he excused himself to the bathroom she bursted in and saw him sitting on the toilet talking to me. She made me feel weird because of this, and he tried to find a way home, but being late and living in the country he couldn't get an Uber. He had been drinking and I was still sick and not comfortable driving. Boy do I regret that. We both went to bed around 3 a.m. and fell asleep on FaceTime. When he woke up in the morning his little cousin and her friend had climbed into the bed to sleep. My fiancé doesn't pay much attention and just leaves because his boss had an emergency and called him in at around 5 a.m. So he leaves and all of a sudden the little cousin starts telling everyone that my fiancé touched her. She waits about a week and filed a police report stating that my fiancé ed her and touched her best friend that night. My fiancé is in shambles now because every lawyer wanted $25,000 to defend him. There was another witness who was at this house all night long and sided with my fiancé that nothing happened. But without questioning any other witnesses at that house he was arrested. His public defender told me and him that he didn't have a strong case based on the fact there was so little evidence and suggested he take a plea deal. So we looked into it and with his public defender he got a deal that would be a 90-day prison sentence and 7 years on the intimacy offender registry. After lots of crying and exhausting all other effort we said okay. The court date comes and his public defender doesn't show up and sends a different attorney to take his place. The judge and prosecutor sentence him to 2 to 10 years and a lifetime on the intimacy offender registry. I felt numb. The man who stole my heart, treated my siblings like family, and who was just a big kid himself. His life is now over, and I don't even know what to do. I feel awful and I feel like my life is over. Everyone who knew him knew he was sweet and had given so much to others, just had his life ruined by his own family. I am angry at myself, his family, and the legal system. Everything in me is telling me I need to do something, but I am helpless. I know for a fact that he didn't do anything except be too naive. I wish I could go back to that night and tell him to drive home, or that I should have gotten him. I'm angry that something so bad happened to such a good man, and most of all I feel like I let it happen. It's been 2 weeks without him and I can't eat or sleep knowing that those 2 girls ruined his life for what seems like nothing, and that they had seemingly planned this out. Even if this did happen, both of these girls' parents knew about what these girls were saying the day it happened, but both parents waited a week before taking their daughters to make a police report. These girls went to school the day after the supposed incident and started talking about how much money they were going to get from the state. I guess I'm just writing this to get this off my chest because I feel like I have been let down and I feel lost.
Hate our class so much you fail almost all of them? Enjoy an early retirement. I had an English teacher named Mrs. Smith. Mrs. Smith, or how she liked to refer to herself, Dr. Smith, she didn't have a doctorate, was a mean old bat that hated anything and everything. She was ugly inside and out. To give a mental image of what she looks like, her face sagged so much it looked like she had a perpetual stroke. She had about 2 feet in between her eyebrows and her eyes. Imagine Ursula and Cruella de Vil had a child and then that child had a baby with the devil. You get Mrs. Smith. None of the other English teachers liked her. There was nothing that they nor the administration could do due to her tenure. That is, until I became her student. Her teaching style included, but was not limited to, yelling at students, putting them down with petty insults, having us read to ourselves in the middle of class, kicking out students that were dozing off then later fall asleep at her desk, not letting female students go to the restroom for very obvious reasons, and the occasional losing students' work then accuse the students of not turning their work in. This last part is what crossed the line for me. You see, I wasn't a grade A student and I sucked at English, so I always played my cards right and made friends with everyone. Students and teachers included. So when I struggled and couldn't do something on my own, I let my charm save me and cash out on my months of being nice to everyone. However, no one could be friends with Mrs. Smith. I tried being polite. I was met with rudeness. I tried asking her how her morning was. I was met with silence and dead stares. I tried asking how I could improve in my writing skills. She told me that she wasn't willing to help. Within the first week of class, I knew I had met my match. So halfway through the semester, we're working on a big research paper. However, the day after the due date, Mrs. Smith had to go up to Illinois for some family issues for 2 weeks. Mind you, we turned in our papers both in hand and on Turnitin.com for plagiarism checking. No biggie. We won't get our grades back for a while, but at least we won't have to deal with her bullshit. Or so we thought. A few days after she gets back, only about half of the students got their papers back. The other half, including myself, were sitting there staring and waiting, thinking that she was going to go back to her desk and pull out the remaining papers to return to her students. But nope, she told us to take out our textbooks and start reading Beowulf. Some students, including myself, that didn't receive their papers tried to interject and inquire about our papers, and she snapped back with "You should have turned them in when they were due." In unison, we respond with "We did." Of course, she denies it, and within a few days, our grades drop immensely. At the end of the grading period, second 6 weeks, our report cards show a big fat F for English. Everyone is livid. And the worst part is if you get anything below a C, you are to be moved to lower level English at the end of the semester. Between the zero from the paper that carried almost half of our grade and only a few weeks remaining in the semester, almost half of the class was doomed to fail out. Now, most of the students were happy with having to leave her class. There was not much they could do. But I was careful. Remember the teaching methods I mentioned above? Well, Mrs. Smith thought that because we were in a classroom that had no cameras, her behavior wasn't being recorded. She was dead wrong. From the second week on, I started recording audio on my phone every day from the moment I walked into the class to the moment I left. Every day. I caught every single one of her personal attacks of students on tape. When she fell asleep, I pulled out my phone and recorded her. My pleas for help to improve and her refusal to help weren't left out either. Every day, I would go home, cut the audio to keep the good parts. And every day, my collection of dirt on her grew. And remember how I said we used Turnitin.com as well as paper? I had coordinated with all of the other students who were going to fail to screenshot all of their Turnitin receipts and send them to me as proof that they turned in their work. When she decided to fail me for her mistake, she unleashed hell on herself. I went straight to the administration and scheduled a parent-teacher admin conference. A week later, my parents, the principal, the school counselor, the head of the English department, and Mrs. Smith were all present. I started with how she had lost half of the class's work and most of us failed because of it. She denied it and again accused us of turning out our work in late as well as cheating and a bunch of other bullshit and lies. I remained calm and just pulled out a folder that contained all of the screenshots from my backpack and handed it to the principal, who then passed it to the head of the English department, who then asked Mrs. Smith to explain it. She instantly turned red in the face and started stuttering. Before she could get any words out, I say, "That's not all. Listen to this." I pull out my phone and start playing back the highlights from the semester. All the while, I'm staring dead into Mrs. Smith's eyes while trying to hold back a poop-eating grin. The suspense in the room would have unalived Jason Statham. After the audio finished, the principal looked at me and said, "I think we've seen enough," and asked me to leave. I sat outside of the conference room savoring the muffled yelling through the walls. I'm pretty sure I heard my dad utter the words "filthy a-hole," but I don't want to point fingers. The parent-teacher conference was on a Friday. I walked into class the following Monday to see an empty desk and a substitute teacher we all recognized and loved. "How did you get revenge on your neighbor?" Here's the story. He had 2 access roads to his property and he didn't live there, he just had livestock there, but insisted on using the one that cut through our property, despite the fact that it was the longer route and it was a literal unpaved road through the woods. He didn't have an easement or anything, just assumed that since he had to drive through our property to get to that shitty lane road, he was allowed to do so. He was a total dick to us for no reason, never said hi, and got upset if we were too close to his property despite the fact that he literally drove through our property every day. Revenge came when lightning struck a tree in the woods and it fell right across the access to the lane road. On our property. He hired a service to chop the tree up and told them they could have the wood as part of the payment. It was nice walnut. My dad wasn't having any of that. He walked down there with a copy of the sale documents, pointed out the marker that clearly separated our land from our asshole neighbor's land, got the neighbor to admit that the tree in question was both from our land and currently laying on our land, not his, and then my dad sent the crew packing and told them if they took so much as a branch from that tree, it was theft and he, a lawyer, would see them in court for it. It's been over 15 years and that tree is still laying across the access to the lane road. He can still access his property via the other road, so he didn't have a leg to stand on to force an easement. F you, Jim. My husband's anger issues are affecting our kids more than I thought they would. My 11-year-old daughter's words broke my heart today. While teary-eyed, she asked, "How can you still be in love with someone like that?" Referring to her dad. Then she started crying. My son, 9, was sitting across from her and started crying too. This is right after my husband came out of the hallway looking and acting very angry with a wooden paddle and seeing the baby had changed the channel from the football game he was watching. My husband does have a slight temper. He has punched a hole through our bedroom door, replaced the door, and punched another hole. The kids saw this. I didn't realize how strongly the kids feel about his behavior. As far as tonight's episode goes, it didn't seem extreme to me. I understood he was stressed from work, our dog peeing and pooping everywhere, our AC being broken for a couple days, us suffering from heat, and so he used a wooden paddle on my daughter who was being way too loud playing video games in her room. When I told my husband the kids are scared of you, can you please apologize to them? He said good, mission accomplished. They should be scared of one of us. I don't know what to make of that. Was he being sarcastic or serious? This conversation happened while he was feeding the baby. The baby kicked his food and stuck his foot in the bowl. This caused my husband to slap the baby's leg. And it was a really hard slap. The baby started crying, of course. My husband actually left fingerprints and the skin bruised. When my son saw that, along with hearing him say good, he started crying. I asked my son if he wanted to write down what he was feeling since he wasn't able to voice it at the moment. He wrote down, "He always hurts the baby and hurts the dog and hurts us and he never cares about us. He only cares about himself. I feel sad when I read that. I felt heartbroken for my son feeling this way, but also confused. I know my husband loves us, spends time with us. Overall I thought he was a great dad. His anger has never been directed at us. He doesn't always hurt the baby. This was maybe the third time. Since I was a little confused, I asked my son what he meant by doesn't care about us. My son said dad makes jokes when we feel sad or are hurt. I don't know what to do. My kids are wondering why I'm still with my husband. I feel like my head was buried in the sand. How did I not notice their feelings? I thought we have an amazing and loving family. I know my husband won't go to therapy because if I've ever mentioned it in the past, he's just rolled his eyes. I'm honestly scared of putting my kids in therapy because of what they'll say. There is no physical mistreatment in my eyes, but the way my son views it, it seems like it's very extreme. My narcissistic parents abandoned me and my siblings for their precious disabled daughter. My grandparents gave me $6 million to make up for IT, but now my parents are demanding I pay for my spoiled sister's college. I have 4 siblings: Max, Lisa, Chris, and Emily. Emily is disabled, and because of that, my parents dedicated themselves 100% to her, leaving the rest of us to fend for ourselves. When Max left for college, I became the main caregiver for my siblings and all household chores were my responsibility. I want to make it clear that Emily's disability does not stop her from functioning like any other person, and she doesn't require any assistance or supervision or 24/7 care. However, my parents have always spoiled her rotten, and she is very rude, mean and entitled. My parents raised her with the mentality that her disability means she's allowed to do whatever and everyone needs to bend backward for her. My grandparents passed away 3 years ago and I inherited approximately $6 million. They were very well off, I know. The reason I received all of it is because, when my grandparents were sick, Max contacted them after almost 10 years of silence because he wanted to know how much he would receive. I'm no contact with him, by the way. They were very aware of how my mom treated me and my siblings, and she was disowned. They were very religious, and Lisa came out as bisexual at 14 and Chris came out as gay at 17. I went no contact with my parents after I moved for college, and when Lisa and Chris started college I offered to cover all of their living/educational expenses as long as they do well in school. They gladly accepted. I also helped my best friend start her own business. I haven't spoken to my parents in 6 years. I haven't blocked them, they just never called/texted. This year Emily started college and she burned out all of her college fund in less than 4 months because she is a spoiled brat and bags were more important than rent. In addition, she is doing horrible in school because she isn't even attending her classes and she will most likely be expelled or held back. My mom called me 2 weeks ago to not ask but demand that I do for her the same I do for Lisa and Chris. I said no because growing up I was literally a slave for her and my parents. I'm helping Lisa and Chris because they are the only ones that treat me as family. I ended the call by telling her that for 18 years Emily was their only kid, so now they have no right to demand anything from the kids they practically abandoned. Now I'm getting crap for everyone, except Lisa and Chris, because I'm causing unnecessary drama. I'm causing a rift between Emily and her siblings. Emily will be the only one without a degree. It's not really my money and my grandparents would want me to help her. Then why didn't they leave anything for her? Family is family and I should help my little sister. I don't buy into that crap. It's not her fault that my parents were bad parents to me. True, but she doesn't do anything to change her behavior. She's disabled and it's not okay to discriminate. What? I feel like I'm doing the right thing but everyone is telling me I'm not, so am I the a-hole? I was fired because I was an attractive young male. Not even joking. I, 21 at the time, was desperate for a job. After working at a pool for 6 summers I decided not to come back out of pride because the pool's board of directors ousted the management team I loved and grew up with. So that brought me to Craigslist and I found a job close to home as a prep cook in a kitchen. It was $12 an hour. I was a junior in college. I emailed the contact and met up with the contact at the local Dunkin' Donuts, we'll call Ted. Ted was a food service manager. We hit it off professionally instantly and he offered me the job on the spot. As I was about to leave he said, "Oh, by the way, the location is in the kitchen of an all-girls sleepaway camp, that's not a problem, is it?" I said I had no problem with it. I just was happy to work anywhere. So the next week I met with Ted and the head chef there. We do a walkthrough of all my duties and toured the kitchen and walk-in facilities as well as the general camp area. It was in the middle of the woods on a lake. Typical northeastern summer camp with log cabins and buildings. While I was in the kitchen talking to Chef and Ted, the director of the camp came in. She was in her 70s. Short gray hair. She reluctantly introduced herself. She seemed disappointed to see me for some reason. I am a friendly guy and really don't have any problems with anyone. But I have to say this was one of the worst first impressions I ever had. I could physically feel her dislike toward me or the choice that the food service company had made choosing me for this job. Later that day Ted pulled me aside and instructed me I am not to talk to any of the girls and I am not to even look at them. I guess camp director had a word with them about me. Saturday morning comes and it's my first day. Only the camp counselors and counselors in training, who are also college aged like me. I cut up vegetables for hours. Unloaded the food tractor trailer that got to this somewhat remote location. It was remote enough not to have cell service. I worked 7 to 5 under the instruction of Chef. I actually learned a lot about culinary arts in this short time. Chef and I became like master and student. He was a chef for 40 years and I liked him a lot. He always showed me what to do and how to do it correctly. I actually really liked my job. I did good and the girls told Chef they loved our food. I just nodded along doing as I was told. It was hard for me not to acknowledge anything with these girls just from a social interaction standpoint. Why was Chef, who who was literally in his 60s, be allowed to have appropriate full conversations with these college girls, but I wasn't. If anything, I thought that was more weird. I felt excluded. But nonetheless, I just kept my head down and did the job best I could. One of the duties of the counselors and campers was the dishes. On Thursday evening I was cleaning my meat slicer. Some girls had a speaker on in the kitchen and their song choice was Get Low by Lil Jon and the East Side Boys. The opening comes on and I just blurted out, "Yo, this was my jam in 2003," and I realized I had acknowledged the girls. These were the only words I said to them in the whole 5 days, and it wasn't even direct. They laughed and smiled. They didn't say anything and it almost felt like they were told not to talk to me either. I had caught some girls looking at me over the week through the crusty screen window from the kitchen and made short eye contact. But I looked down quickly after noticing them looking at me. Just kind of reacted to their eyes I could feel on me. Now it's Friday morning. It's July 4th weekend. I finally was getting off Saturday after I had worked 50 hours in 5 days. I arrive at the camp and I saw Ted sitting out front. He was not on location any other day, so him being there was a surprise. He looked a little distraught. I get out of my car and he quickly approaches me. He says my name and says, "Let's take a walk." He sits me down on a bench. "Man, I'm sorry, but the camp's board of directors heard that an attractive college-aged male was working in the kitchen and they decided they didn't want someone like me working here. Chef and I fought for you being a good kid and good worker and following the instructions, but in the end it just isn't up to us. We have an at-will agreement with the camp. Wow. And just like that I'm unemployed." I said goodbye to Chef. A minivan pulls up with my replacement. A woman in her 40s. I just looked at her, nodded, and got in my car and left. I was absolutely sick. I'm out of a job because of who I am and no other reason. I wanted to cry. Spending all of June looking for a job. Finally getting one. And then it's all gone in 5 days. At the same time though, as someone who was fat and lost a lot of weight and had pretty low self-esteem growing up about my looks, I was kind of flattered. I'll be honest, my confidence as a bachelor grew significantly after this event. I went home and packed a bag and I decided I would surprise my family down the Jersey Shore where they were at our family friend's large seaside second home. I had been invited but I declined because of work obligations. After all, Saturday was my only day off. They were on the beach lounging. It had taken nearly 4 hours to get down there because of scores of holiday weekend traffic. It normally takes 2. I had been through a lot that day and it almost felt like that final scene in The Shawshank Redemption on a smaller scale. They notice it's me walking toward them. They were like, "Aren't you supposed to be at work?" I was like, "Funny story, guys." And told them what happened. I ended up going back to the pool. My sister still worked there and luckily I didn't burn any bridges. They took me back at a slight raise and I was grateful they did. I had worked there from age 14 to 20, so I was back at home. At the time I wanted to pursue legal action because surely this is discrimination. Just to get a summer's worth of money out of them. It also took like a month to get paid. I talked to lawyers who said I pretty much have no case because I hadn't worked there that long, and one even said he heard of a case in Iowa or something where a girl was fired for being too hot and the court sided with the company. Just probably wasn't worth it. I decided I would just take the L. Looking back now, it was probably the best thing. I put myself in their shoes. If I were running a camp meant to be a feminine retreat, I wouldn't want a muscular, tall, dark and handsome fraternity president working there. God knows I would have accepted any affection from those counselors if presented the opportunity. I was a bit of a womanizer in those days. I just think I never should have been hired in the first place if my demographic information as a college-aged male would be a problem. Now I'm just a fat dad to a little girl. Maybe she'll go to that camp too, lol. What prison incident will you never forget? There are a lot of incidents that I will never forget. I can't forget. However, this one involves me, a friend and another prisoner. There was this little creepy looking guy in our wing. Several times I wanted to ask what he was in prison for. But I also knew that if I did ask him and he said he was in there for something against a child, I may lose it and get assault charge. A couple times he tried to talk to me, but I told him to stay away. I just knew something was real bad about him. It was bad enough having to worry about prisoners who could do you harm and maybe getting more time for defending myself. This was a nobody and I didn't want to mess up my chances for parole. One day the caseworker walks in and walks right up to him and says real loud so all could hear, "I am tired of getting snitch kites from you every day. I know you are making most of the stuff up." After he leaves, my cellie, who was also a good friend, walks up to the creep and says, "Well, at least we know you are a snitch," which I already expected. "I bet you are a child touched her too." The creep in an angry voice says, "I am not a child touched her." My cellie then asks what he was in for. He said, "I threw a baby out the window, but I in no way touched the baby." I lunged at the guy and my friend and another guy grabbed me. They started walking with me, telling me to calm down. I told them he has to leave the wing. I can't be around him. As we are walking, the creep runs up to us and says, "You don't understand." The baby would not shut up. He goes to walk away and I grab him around the neck and tell him, "There are no windows for us to throw you out of, but we can toss you off the top walk." I did not realize that my arm around his neck was squeezing harder and harder. My friend was trying to get me to let go of him. Others in the wing were trying to block the guards from seeing. I didn't know this until later. I was livid. Finally they got me to let go of him. To this day I am grateful to my friend Kevin. If it wasn't for him I may not be out of prison. The creep did leave the wing and he tried to sue the caseworker for putting his life in danger. The weird thing is he didn't tell me. I do not know why. I answered this question not just to answer the question, but 1, to tell you what a good friend I have, and 2, I have told people about trying to better myself in prison. I have told you about some good things I did, but I think it's only fair that you know the bad things.
My 28 husband, 30, left me for my twin sister. Title says it all. I've been married to my husband 2 years, together almost 15. I found out that he has been having an affair with my twin sister nearly the entire time we've been married. I've never experienced anything so hard. I guess I've been lucky in life, but wow. I didn't even know it was possible to feel so sad.
What unexpected hobby has significantly improved your relationship? My deaf neighbor. A couple of years ago, I moved into a new apartment and found some flashcards for sign language from Gallaudet University. I thought it could be useful to learn how to communicate with people who don't speak the same language as me, so I kept them. A few months later, I met a girl at work who caught my eye. We hadn't spoken much before since we didn't work together, but one day she came into our store looking for a part we didn't have in stock. We directed her to another place where she could find it, and she left. A couple of weeks passed and she returned during my shift again. This time, I had the opportunity to assist her directly as she ordered some parts. Our interactions were limited to these visits lasting about 15 minutes each until one day while working with her we began talking about things outside of work and got closer over time. She mentioned American Sign Language, ASL, which prompted me to ask if she would teach me how to use it. Luckily enough she agreed. We decided to meet at our local community center where we could practice without feeling self-conscious or being interrupted by anyone else around us. There was just us two learning basic signs such as greetings, expressing gratitude and apologies, but also more complex ones like those used when dating or flirting, which made things quite awkward at first but eventually became an enjoyable experience that brought us even closer together. Learning ASL has opened up a new world of understanding between us that has been incredibly inspiring. Now we can communicate without relying solely on spoken words, which is truly amazing. Our friendship blossomed from this experience so much so that we ended up establishing a sign language club at our local community center in order to raise awareness about this vibrant form of communication and foster inclusivity among all people regardless of their ability or disability.
Pushy woman was trying to replace my dead daughter in my family. She called me cruel when I called her outrageous. I lost my daughter Abby 7 years ago. She married Scott and had 3 children with him. Scott and my grandkids stayed part of the family, and last year Scott remarried. His current wife is Beth. We all knew Beth for a few years before the wedding and she was always very friendly. Though at times she could be a little pushy. Scott would always handle that though. After they got married, Beth's pushiness got worse and Scott appears to have lost control. For example, Beth was upset when she dropped my grandkids off one day because according to her, we had not added photos of her to our house. In our living room, we have a display with photos of our kids and their weddings. She felt her and Scott's wedding should be there. Another was when she was upset when my grandkids spent Mother's Day with us and our extended family and we did not include her. Scott wasn't invited either. Mother's Day is a difficult day for him due to a bad relationship with his own mother. But Beth said we should invite her too because she's part of the family, and then she said she's one of our kids too. I asked her what she meant and she told me she is obviously going to be one of our kids now that she's the mother figure for our grandkids. I told Scott what she said and he was embarrassed and told me he would speak to her. Beth was also upset when my husband posted on Facebook to say something about our kids and she didn't get mentioned as one of our kids but as Scott's wife. We mentioned Scott and how wonderful he was to Abby and how wonderful he is as a father. Then, for my grandson's 14th birthday, we were all together and he wanted a mom's side photo. Beth attempted to get into the photo and when Scott tried to remind her, she said she's part of the family now. He pulled her aside and the photo was taken without her. But she told one of my sons after that she felt like we weren't treating her as a daughter and then said Scott never treated her as a lesser wife. But the worst was when we saw them a little over Christmas and Beth was upset that we got them a joint gift, for her and Scott, instead of getting her one alone. She told me she's tired of feeling like she's not really family and she said she feels like we always put Abby first when she's here now. I saw red after this and told her she could never take my daughter's place and the fact she ever thought she could is outrageous. She told me the kids call her mom and they think the world of her, so why wouldn't we? I told her the kids have always called her Beth when I hear them. She turned around and said that's our fault because the kids should be calling her mom but they don't. She lost it from there. Beth stormed out and I explained what happened to Scott. He apologized and left the kids with us so he could speak to her. I think they worked it out, but Beth said I was needlessly cruel to imply she's not as good as Abby and doesn't deserve to be our daughter.
I just walked in on my girlfriend of 7 years having sex with my roommate. My last class of the day was cancelled, so I decided to come home and surprise my girlfriend. I went to the store and grabbed everything to make her favorite meal, lasagna. I was carrying the bags up the stairs and put them down in front of the door to fish my keys out of my pocket. And then I heard my girlfriend moaning. I thought that she was taking care of herself because I know that she likes to do that sometimes when I'm not around. So I didn't have a sudden aha moment or anything. I walked in and there were her and my roommate on the couch. I opened the door and kind of just froze when I saw it. She looked up at me and he turned around and saw it was me. And I just saw red. As much as I wanted to, I didn't kick his ass. I just dropped the bags and walked away. As I was getting into my car, they both came running out and yelling at me to stop, but I just floored it and got out of there as quickly as I could. I called my best friend and talked to him about it. He offered to come kick his ass. I told him no. I didn't want him to get in trouble from it. I even had the engagement ring that I planned to use to propose to her this summer when we went on vacation. It's in my safe that I keep in the closet so I know that she doesn't know about it, but I plan to spend the rest of my life with her. Why didn't I see this coming? My last class was supposed to start at 12, but since it was cancelled, I was home by 12:30. So it's been 4+ hours. My phone has been blowing up from both of them. I haven't looked at any of the messages or answered any of the calls. I called my bank and made sure that she wasn't on any of my accounts for anything. I'm going to go back later tonight and pack up all of her stuff and drop it off at her place tomorrow. Then I'll probably take a bag of clothes to my friend's house and stay there until school ends. 3 weeks. What should I do next? My best friend's sister, Emily, went through all the messages on my phone from both of them and deleted anything that didn't need to be on there. She texted both of them from my phone telling them that it was her that was texting and told her that a friend would be by at a certain time to pick up my stuff tomorrow. And she told him that I would be there by tomorrow to grab some things and that I was going to try to get out of a lease by talking to my landlord first. I want to thank each and every one of you who have given me advice, offered me an ear to rant/yell to, or offered me a shoulder to cry on. After my first edit, many of you messaged me and asked me not to drink, / that I was better than that, / that this wasn't the thing to do. I sincerely appreciate that. My friend and his sister took me out to dinner to try to get my mind off of everything. At first I wasn't really up to going, but I figured that it would be better to try to focus my mind on something different. My friends called up a couple of my other friends and the 6 of us went out to dinner. I wasn't really into it. I was kind of down, but my friends did anything and everything that they could to cheer me up. I can honestly say that I love my friends and everything that they've done for me. Finally, to the people that have been in the same position as I'm currently in, or to those that have been in a situation even relatively similar, I have a couple things. First, none of what your exo did says anything about you. It tells what kind of person they are. Your reactions tell the kind of person that you are. Secondly, all of you are much stronger than you realize. Many of you have given me such amazing advice and you know exactly where I'm coming from. Talking about it isn't always the easiest, and many of you did try to help an internet stranger, so thank you. Finally, many of you have much greater things to look forward to. Like one of the old teachers said, it's like moving on to the next book in the sequence. Yeah, you may have to wait a little bit for the author to release it, but it's worth the wait. Edit: I'm at my best friend's house. Him and his sister have been super awesome to me. Their doorbell rang about 5 minutes ago. It was her. His sister pushed her out. I wanted to yell at her, but I started drinking Fireball instead. It's going to be a long couple weeks until school gets out.
Am I the a-hole for how I checked my pregnant neighbor for how she was acting with my husband? My family lives directly across from our neighbor, Ade, who is, from what I remember, 6 months pregnant. Our neighborhood grew close when her husband died 2 months ago due to a drunk driver. The entire neighborhood basically came to help, and even now the community still does semi-monthly-ish BBQs and stuff. We know how it felt to have a parent absent. Now, no, my husband did not die, but he was still deployed when we were pregnant with our first. I know that this is not the same thing she is going through, so we often checked on her, invited her over, conversations on how to handle being on your own while pregnant. For a couple of weeks now, she's been asking my husband to be her handyman. My husband has no issue with this, and neither did I until a week or so ago. She asks my husband for help over the simplest things and barely talks to me anymore. Most times she'll knock, ask if my husband is home, and if I say no, she tells me to let him know she needs him and walks off. No talking, having chai together, nothing. I can admit I am a little bit jealous and feel weird about this. It was like she was only wanting my husband around. I tried to push these feelings aside until the first incident. Basically, she knocked on my door and handed me a covered plate of cookies. I got excited and started to thank her for how the girls love cookies, but she interrupted me and told me that these were strictly for my husband, not for us. I had a sour taste in my mouth and thanked her. It made me feel like she was trying to have a big house and little house situation. I let my husband know what happened and how I felt. He assured me nothing was going on, no doubt, but he also agreed that what she did was disrespectful. We agreed he would stop going over. He would give her the numbers of men he knows who do maintenance. She has been cold with us. The second incident happened when the community was having a barbecue in our neighborhood park. The children were running around and us adults were sitting with the lawn chairs talking about whatever. Ade piped up and said how she is grateful to us all for helping her, even me, after it was strange how you basically forbid your husband to come over to help anymore. I got a little mad, like I was slapped by God himself, and just said, well, baking a gift for my husband only and saying his wife and daughters aren't included is strange too. Another neighbor changed the topic. It was awkward. I'm sure there's gossip and whatnot. On one hand, I know she must still be grieving and maybe she's just looking to have someone to be there for her. On the other hand, I feel like the incident with the cookies and then the barbecue makes me feel disrespected. My husband is not happy with how I responded. He says it is not my job to check someone and I should have just let her talk. I guess I just want to know if I was a jealous asshole through all of this. I don't really have anyone I could talk to about this personally.
My wife found out about my spontaneity prompts. Okay, so I understand where she's coming from, kinda. It could maybe feel a bit robotic to her, and not natural. Like you have to be reminded to say affectionate things to her. But that doesn't mean she's right here. You're taking the effort to remember and do nice things for her. That's what matters. I get she feels a bit insecure about it now, and perhaps she's thinking back to all the times you said cute stuff to her that she thought was authentic, but instead she thinks it was manufactured and off an online list of things to say to please your girlfriend or whatever. It's not completely wrong of her to feel that initially, but honestly, if she continues ignoring the main thing here, that you care about her and took the work to make her feel better, even after you explain it to her, then she's being pretty selfish. I don't think she's inherently being selfish by wanting verbal affection or actions. People have different love languages and process affection differently, that's okay. I have to ask though, how often does your wife do such things for you? Not just in the form of verbally affection, do you feel she gives out enough affection in the way you want? If not, then she's being inconsiderate. I think you should talk to her and explain it to her that everything you tell her is true, and that you wrote it yourself. Just that, well, not everyone is intrinsically a romantic genius and can come up with just the right thing to tell their partner at the right time, and that's okay. Communicate with her and tell her you understand where she's coming from, but also that she doesn't need to feel that way. Calm her fears down, and also, if she doesn't already, tell her that you need to be given affection too, in whatever your preferred form is.
Am I the a-hole for wearing a bikini on vacation despite my insecure boyfriend? As much as I feel like I made the right choice, I'm still interested in seeing how other people would have reacted in this sort of disagreement. Honestly, I've learned a lot and I won't tolerate bullshit like this again in any of my future relationships. For context, I have a full-time remote accounting job, but I also do brand deals and technically work as an Instagram model on the side. I had been posting selfies for a while, but back in 2019, my profile blew up for whatever reason. After I had gained a couple 10,000 followers, I started getting brand deals, and even though it's not something I ever saw myself doing, the money was easy, and since then I have been a part-time Insta model. Of course, my DMs and comments are full of thirsty creeps, but I have met a lot of other great creators after entering the influencing space. Still, even though I may look picture perfect on Instagram, deep down I'm still the introverted math nerd I've always been. Anyway, I met my boyfriend one night out when I was visiting friends in LA, and after I flew home we kept talking. At first, he was a very polite, decent guy, and he asked me lots of great questions about myself and always kept our conversations lively. He flew me out to visit him a few times, and we always had fun together. It wasn't until after he asked me to be his girlfriend did he start revealing his red flags. When we were first talking, he would constantly compliment me and tell me how I looked on my profile, but it's like a switch flipped after we started dating, and he was suddenly very rude and controlling when it came to how I dress and what I posted. Anyways, he pissed me off one day after he got mad at me for posting a full body pic, but after I forgave him for acting like an A, he made it up to me by booking us a weekend vacation. I was excited, and I had a long week and was looking forward to lounging on the beach. I also wanted to take a break from social media, so I was barely on my phone the entire trip. The morning of the first day was great. We had a great breakfast together and he had rented us a beautiful, expensive hotel. The issue started when we decided to go down to the hotel pool before bed, and I took out my swimsuit. When he saw it, his face twisted and he became upset. He took the bikini out of my hand and asked why I needed to wear something so revealing. I told him I was more comfortable in bikinis, and that this was my favorite swimsuit. He started rummaging through my suitcase and kept asking if I had any one piece. I got annoyed at him and said screw it, I'm just gonna shower and head to bed. He dropped the issue, but I was only getting more annoyed since he was bringing his insecure bulge tea on vacation. The very next day was the same story. We had a great time in the daytime, but in the evening I wanted to go to the pool and things started to go downhill. My boyfriend said I should just relax again, and that the pool was probably dirty anyway. We could see it from our window, it looked fine, and I told him to go ahead and I'd meet him down there after I showered. He seemed apprehensive but went down to the pool anyway. When I went to put on my swimsuit after my shower, I realized it wasn't in my bag. In fact, it was nowhere to be found. I tore up the hotel room and eventually found it under a bunch of dirty food wrappers at the bottom of the trash can. It was obvious my boyfriend had tried to throw it away since he didn't want me wearing it. Even though I was dirty from the food wrappers, I put it on and marched down to the pool, then plopped myself right next to him. I gave him a dirty look and asked him why he thought he could control my body enough to go as far as to steal and throw away my stuff. He started stuttering out an apology, but I raised my hand and told him that he had successfully driven me away with his constant insecurity when it came to my body. I told him I wasn't happy with how he was been treating me and that I deserved more respect. God, I finally told him I had booked my own room before I came down, and I would be booking my own flight home too. His face fell as he realized what I was doing, and I was thankful we were in a public place since he started to get angry next. He started getting in my face and whispering angrily, calling me a SLT and saying that I needed to learn how to listen to him. I told him I didn't have to do a damn thing for him, and before he could get another word in I got up and left the pool area to go buy my flight. I don't care that I basically abandoned him in another country. He's a big boy, and if he can harass me about my clothes, he can enjoy the rest of his trip alone.
My ex's affair partner wants me to have their children. My ex, Harry, and I met when we were in high school. We met through mutual friends and instantly connected. We started dating not long after I finished high school and everything seemed to be going extremely fast. We moved in together after college, and 2 years after moving in I fell pregnant with our daughter. He was automatically excited to become a father and I was thrilled that we were going to become a little family. That was until during labor I got a call from Harry's friend telling me that Harry was supposed to meet him but didn't show. I told him I had tried getting in touch with him myself as I was about to give birth, and we then became worried. After I had given birth, Harry's friend rang me back to tell me Harry was at his affair partner's house. I was shocked. I hung up and started crying. Thankfully my mum was with me and calmed me down. Harry tried to explain himself but I didn't care. I immediately packed my bags, took my name off the lease and went to live with my parents. That was 5 years ago and I am now in a much better place physically and mentally. Me and Harry co-parent our daughter and he is engaged to the woman he cheated on me with, which stung, but I inevitably got over it. They have 2 kids together, but once his fiancée had their second child she found out due to complications throughout the birth that she couldn't have any more kids. They were both crushed and I sympathized with them mainly out of trying to keep the peace for my daughter. 2 days ago I was sent a message from Harry's fiancée asking me if we could meet at a local cafe. This was odd to me as we had never really spoken aside from parties and family gatherings for a few minutes, but I usually only spoke to Harry regarding everything else. I replied that we could and we met yesterday morning. As soon as I walked in, I saw her and Harry sitting at a table, so I automatically knew something was up. I walked over and sat down and they said they were just going to come out and say what they needed to. Harry spoke up and told me that due to them not being able to have another child, they were wondering if I would be their surrogate, which left me stunned. I laughed and asked if they were joking, to which his fiancée replied that they were serious because they wanted at least 5 kids and needed me to be a surrogate for the next 3. This only made me laugh even more. I couldn't stop laughing at their audacity to ask such a thing from me when Harry was the one who cheated on me with this woman while I was in labor with his child. His fiancée then started crying and called me so many names I think she was making some up along the way. She stormed out of the cafe and Harry turned to me telling me this was the reason he cheated on me. He told me I was a horrible human and that I was heartless for laughing in their faces after they had decided to be vulnerable enough to ask me to be their surrogate. This upset me and I replied by telling him that the reason he cheated was because he wanted to and that it had nothing to do with me. I also reminded him that he already had 3 kids including the daughter we had together, and if he really wanted a surrogate then they needed to save all their money to afford one that would be willing to go through with their insane plan, because I wasn't even an option that should have crossed their minds. I left the cafe and went to my mom's house. When I got there I was bombarded with calls and texts from my ex, his fiancée, and pretty much the entirety of their families. All of them were spamming me, calling me an a-hole. My family is on my side and thinks I did the right thing by declining, but I'm wondering if I might have been a bit harsh on them. What are the weirdest parts of being a parent? My 5-year-old son broke character and talked to me like an adult. This happened about 2 years ago and I was so blown away I took notes and told my wife about it, so I still have the notes on my phone. My 5-year-old son was pretty typical for his age, always goofing around, never serious, always working some angle to negotiate treats or buying whatever thing was at the top of his list this week. Kids have a selfish worldview and that's mostly understandable because they haven't matured yet. So when my son asked me to go for a walk, just the 2 of us, I immediately laughed and thought, okay, what's he going to ask for? We start walking and I ask, what's on your mind, buddy? He said, nothing really, I just want to have some time to be with you and be peaceful and be out in nature. Wow, okay, this is progress, I thought. Then he said, I want you to know you're the best dad I've ever had. You really do help me and my sister a lot and you're really very nice, even though we don't usually tell you. So I just wanted to say thank you for everything and that I want to be near you always. By this point, the only reason I wasn't completely crying my eyes out is that I thought it was some kind of a joke or lead up to ask for something. This was totally out of character, especially at this age. I managed to croak out something like, I'm really glad to hear that and I love you very much. Then we just enjoyed the rest of the walk. It really felt like for a moment I was speaking to a soul who has had several lives. You're the best dad I've ever had, and wanted to speak directly to me instead of play the role of a child. I'm so glad it happened and it's something I will never forget. Later he went right back to being the same old goofy kid that I love.
What are some guy secrets girls don't know about? When people come crying to us, our first inclination is to fix the problem. If we tie down anything in the back of a pickup truck or trailer, it's physically impossible for us not to stand back and say that's not going anywhere. We really do think your hair is good. It looked good before and after you got a haircut. It looked good curly and it looked good straight. It looked good when you woke up and when you made it. As long as it's shaped like the hair we gave girls on stick figures when we were 5 years old, we think it looks good. I'm a girl and I've found out through the years that when guys say something, don't think too much into it, like what's the hidden meaning? Don't overthink it. Guys normally say stuff that should be taken at face value. The nod when you see a guy you don't know, or kind of know but don't really know well enough to talk to, walks by, you give a subtle nod of your head, which they return. We desperately want you to toss us things instead of just handing them to us. I like hugs. I'm not staring at you, I'm zoned out thinking about how I'd start a brewery in medieval England whilst my eyes just happen to be facing your direction.
I threatened my psycho ex with the police. I moved to this house 3 years ago and met my neighbor. He was amazing and we had really good times together, but things went downhill and we broke up. I started to notice something on my windows but didn't know what these things were until my cat one day jumped to the windows meowing loudly and aggressively, so I jumped to the window and opened it to find him pressing his ear to my window trying to listen to what I was doing. I immediately opened the door as he was heading back to his house and I finally could catch him at his door, so I asked him what he was doing. And he said that he heard a loud noise coming from my house, which is not true, and he was worried about me as I live alone, so he wanted to make sure I'm fine without actually bothering me. Later on, the earmarks didn't stop and started to be more and more, especially when I started seeing someone else. So I took a picture of the earmarks and sent it to him and told him that I know those were his while stalking me, and I advised him that it's not my place to say, but I think he needs to get some therapy because it's been going for some long time and that I don't feel safe in this case and I can't afford to move ATM, so if it didn't stop I'm going to tell the police about it. He got so pissed off and started calling me psycho, and I'm the one who needs therapy for accusing him of such a thing. And ended up calling me the a-hole. So Ada?
What was the moment you realized your significant other didn't care about you at all anymore?
After we had our second daughter, my husband left when she was 2 weeks old to take a job in the family business in another state. This left me with a 2.5-year-old and a newborn at home to try and sell the house and pack up everything. At 44 days old, my newborn was diagnosed with RSV and hospitalized. Friends took our toddler and I spent all my time 24/7 in the hospital. It was a severe infection and several times the alarms went off and they had to intervene to keep her alive. The first 4 took 7 attempts and they ended up getting it into a vein in her head. I had no clothes or toiletries, but the nurses gave me scrubs and a patient hygiene kit. I begged my husband to come and be there with us, to help. He told me that the baby was well taken care of and he was too busy. I told him I needed him. He said no. He never came, even though it was a family-owned business and they all supported him taking time off. Once I brought our baby home, she had to have breathing treatments every 2 hours night and day along with suctioning. She also needed to eat and have diaper changes, plus I had my toddler, too. I honestly don't remember much about those few weeks. I lived on massive amounts of coffee and sheer determination. He soon became my ex. My girls are both happy, healthy and successful adults today.
Here's the #1 way to save any relationship from disaster that nobody ever taught you. First off, relationships fail mainly because of a lack of communication. Here's how to prevent that from ever happening or what to do if it does occur. It's called reflective listening. And the goal isn't to solve the problem, but simply to let the other person be heard, acknowledged. If done right, the other person should be like, okay, I feel understood now. And then you want to go to a quiet place where you both can sit and make eye contact. And then you find an object, a cup, a cloth, anything. And whoever holds the object, it's their turn to speak. And the other person doesn't speak until they've handed the object back. And so you give them the object and you say something like, help me understand. Eye contact here is crucial. And you don't want to roll your eyes or scoff or anything like that. Be genuinely open and interested in what they're saying. Once they hand you the object back, try to paraphrase what they were saying. Like it sounds like you're saying or it sounds like that makes you feel. And even check to make sure that you didn't miss anything. Thank your partner for sharing and let them know you have a better perspective of the situation. And then take a quiet pause, look them in the eye and apologize genuinely for however you might have contributed to the issue. And then you can actually tackle the problem. Once your partner feels understood, it's no longer you versus me. It's us versus the problem. And by practicing this, you'll find these same sentiments coming back to you, for we all want to be acknowledged, to be understood, to be loved.
What tip made you go from a loner to a playboy within days? I've always struggled with dating because I was scared of getting rejected. But that changed after doing this one thing my friend recommended. He had a successful dating life because he was supposedly charismatic and always knew what to say to women. I was jealous of him and wanted to have that same level of experience, but my awkwardness was holding me back from following in his footsteps. Unlike him, I never had a real conversation with a woman and have been single for 23 years. We also had completely different ideas for a fun Saturday night. Where he would go out, I would stay home and binge watch anime. But day after day of doing the same thing, I got sick of this routine, and I fell into a rabbit hole of always comparing my dull life to his wild one. And one day of too much self-deprecating and wishing I was somebody else, I did something I never thought I would do. I downloaded Tinder because maybe I could talk to women online, just not in person. But setting up my Tinder profile was nearly impossible since I had no idea how to make a woman swipe right on me. My bio was pretty boring because I never did anything fun, and I didn't have any pictures that were Tinder-worthy. I just did whatever and told myself it was okay because I was new to online dating. I wasn't expecting many matches, but I still wasn't happy that my messages were drier than the Sahara Desert. And the one time a girl swiped right on me, I had no idea how to keep the conversation going. I never thought I would be the type to ask a woman, "What are you doing?" every 5 minutes, but here I was doing that. She never talked to me again. I got fed up with my lack of social skills and inability to flirt, and I was determined to change. So, I asked my friend, since he was the only woman expert I knew. I called him and begged for him to share his secret sauce, or give me a few tips on how to talk to women. That's when he revealed something shocking. He used to be just like me, introverted, boring, and he didn't know a thing about women. I asked how he was able to change because I needed to change as well. He told me to use a dating AI and listed off some specific ones, but he said Pickup Pal helped him flirt better, so he recommended that to me the most. Obviously, I didn't believe him and thought he wanted to gatekeep his secret because there was no way an app could change an introvert into a playboy. But he was literal proof that it could, and I rarely saw him strike out with a girl. Honestly, I didn't want to take his advice because I thought he was messing with me. So, I started searching on Google to learn about women and how to interact with them. But every website I saw had the same generic information. Say hello, be yourself, be confident. None of that had worked because after saying hello, I would start stuttering and fumbling over my words. And I couldn't be confident because I didn't know how to. At that point, I was getting desperate, and it was clear the only way to break out of my monotonous routine was to download the dating AI. It couldn't hurt to try at this point, and even though I still didn't have high expectations for it, the app worked out better than I thought it would. I used it to fix my Tinder profile because it had a bio generator and photo analyzer. For my bio, I listed some of my interests and copied what it generated onto my Tinder profile. And it chose the best pictures to use, which, thank God, because I originally had a picture of me holding a fish on my profile, and I thought that was okay. The app told me to get rid of that first. It could also generate a response to a message to keep the conversation going, but I didn't have a use for that yet. However, with a new bio and pictures, I had 4 matches in just 3 days, and I used the dating AI on all of them. All my conversations went well because I was constantly generating interesting replies, and the women seemed interested in getting to know me. I was having fun texting people, and my phone was constantly blowing up from their messages. But it didn't take me long to realize I was only connecting with one girl since we had the most in common. We started bonding over One Piece and Valorant, and our conversations quickly moved on to other interests. Talking to her felt natural, and I only used the AI when our conversations started dying because I never wanted to stop talking to this girl. After 3 weeks of nonstop texting, I asked her out on a date. She said yes, but then realized I had no idea where to take her. I was about to freak out, but I checked the AI to see if it had anything that would help me, and it had a date generator. All I had to do was put a location and her interests, and then it would pick the perfect places to take her. I chose to take her to this popular Mexican restaurant, and she loved the food. I was mostly worried about our date being awkward or me not knowing what to say because it felt like I had relied too much on the AI to help me. But our conversation went smoothly, just like it did over text, and using the AI consistently meant I knew what to say when our talks died down. Talking about things I liked and asking her if she liked it too had us talking for a while, and I got to know her by asking about her past. That was my first date, and I enjoyed it so much that I couldn't wait to go out with her again. Our conversations extended past texting, and it was clear we were both into each other, so I asked her to be my girlfriend. We've only been dating for 2 months, but I'm really happy with her. Though I'll admit, I still use Pickup Pal when I want to take her on dates because I always want things to be perfect for her. I really hope she never finds out. What's the creepiest thing that you've seen other families do that they accept as totally normal? I unfortunately grew up in the creepy family. My mom was obsessed with Titanic to the point that almost every surface of the house was covered in something Titanic related. She would talk for hours about it, the movie, and how she was the reincarnation of a passenger to anyone who would listen. She cross-stitched Titanic things. She made those weird picture carpet things that were Titanic themed. My Heart Will Go On was basically on repeat every day, every hour, every minute. She'd play Titanic video games, listen to the music, save pictures online and talk to people online about Titanic. She once redid my entire grade 2 speech to be about the Titanic, came into the class, handed me the new speech cards and sat there listening to me say the speech she wrote. For my birthday she got me a Titanic t-shirt and a clock. She hung up both and I wasn't allowed to touch them. Christmas was these weird Titanic dinner plate things. She got a Titanic tattoo. At one point, I was allowed the rare chance to have someone sleep overnight. I invited my friend and he was immediately weirded out. So we hung out in my room, which was pretty much free of Titanic stuff. When we were trying to sleep, my mom, who is mostly deaf, decided it would be a good idea to play My Heart Will Go On at like 2 a.m. loudly. You could feel Celine Dion's banshee-like voice vibrating through the walls and the floor and into your skull. Normally I'd just ignore it never crossed my mind as being weird. But my friend began asking me questions and I stopped for a second. Wait. He's right. Why was this okay? I thought. We had no AC. It was summer. Hot, exhausted and annoyed, I decided for once to confront my mother about this. I just asked it straight up. Why are you playing My Heart Will Go On in the middle of the night? My friend then got a front row seat to my mom pulling me to the ground by my ear and managing to scream over the booming speakers about how she was the adult and how she makes the decisions in the house and that as a kid, I have no right to ask for anything. I'd like to note that if you haven't heard a mostly, or entirely deaf, person scream, you just can't imagine how frightening it sounds. After that, my friend quickly stopped being my friend and everyone made fun of me because my mom was scary. Unfortunately I couldn't disagree, it opened my eyes. We were the weird ones. I was also grounded for a week. No toys, no going outside, no TV or radio. No books. Just sit in your room or sleep. Bratty kid wants me to pay for his mode cell phone after he left it in my yard. I declined and taught him a lesson he will not forget. My yard goes pretty close to the neighbor's concrete pad where they have a basketball court set up. Neighborhood kids always go there to play and usually leave their bikes and things on my grass. It's not that big of a deal except I have had to ask them to move their stuff several times when I'm mowing. This is the first time I've mowed this year and the grass is a few inches higher than it should be. Anyway, a kid comes over and I'm mowing but he still puts the basketball he brought with him down in my grass. I get to the basketball and just decide I can nudge it with the front of the mower and out of the way. I made eye contact with the kid several times waiting for him to move it before I got there and he never did, so I figured whatever, it'll roll. Well, I bump it with my mower over to a section of mower grass and as I continued forward past where it was there was a loud clunking and crackling like I'd just run over a rock. The rock turned out to be his iPhone. He was upset that his phone was broken and I did feel bad, but my thought was that he should have said something or moved it before I got there. He goes home and about 30 minutes later his mom shows up and tells me I broke it and am responsible for replacing it, that I should have told him to move his stuff because I am an adult. I tell her I'm sorry about the phone and politely decline her request. She just says I promise you will be paying for it. And then storms off. Update: well, the mother and son showed up at my door around noon and apologized. She said that she misunderstood what happened and thought that I'd done it on purpose to teach her son a lesson about leaving his stuff in my yard. I guess he explained to her it was his fault, which I thought was commendable for someone his age. She told me that she just stressed about it because she is a single mother. And doesn't really have the means to replace it at the moment, and that if it was anything else she probably wouldn't have gotten so upset, but he likes hanging out with other kids and that's how she keeps track of him. I told her about my spare phone, iPhone 7. But I thought that I should perhaps have him work for it. I have a detached garage and have been needing to clean it and told her if he wanted to help me I'd give him the phone. He instantly looked excited. I imagine he felt like he'd never get a new phone, and she acted very grateful and said he could help. Left and came back an hour later, Just the sun this time and we got started cleaning. Took about 4 hours, a lot of work but nothing too hard, he's just 12. I had a couple of cords of firewood I wanted to be moved out and stacked into a rack, and then a bunch of boxes I cut up and had his bag and carried to the curb. He swept, had a Coke and a couple of slices of pizza, then got his phone. I had a talk with him about paying attention to where his things are because it won't always work out like this. I also asked him if he wanted to mow my yard every weekend, and his mom says he can. I'll pay him $30 a week. He again acted excited at the thought of making money, and when I asked him what he'd spend it on, he said games. We figured out new games would be about $60 and worked it out that I'd pay him $20 for 3 weeks, then $65 on the 4th week so he could cover tax because it might be hard for him to save. The 4th week he will do an extra little chore to cover the $5, like sweep off the porch or walkway. I hope I've done the right thing and didn't make him think that everything just works out, but I did my best to have him earn it. And hopefully showed an equal measure of kindness that he will carry with him. I also didn't want the mother to stress over replacing the phone, as my mom was also a single mother and I know how tough it can be. My own son is just 2, so it was my first real opportunity to pass on some fatherly wisdom, which I hope is what I did. While my wife was on her deathbed, she made me promise to take care of her Down syndrome daughter. Today I broke that promise. I, 55 male, just lost my wife, 56 female, to cancer. My late wife's entire life was about her 30-year-old daughter, who suffers from Down syndrome and has never and will never have the ability to live independently. Nor will she ever have the ability to ever exercise any real amount of emotional impulse control. Before you all start in on the evil stepdad who doesn't care to understand line of thinking, I want to add that I have been in her life since she was 5, and spent years fearing the day where she was physically developed to the point where punches, scratches, and throwing things were a real threat. Once that happened, all of my wife's friends stopped visiting our house. One of them even said that her uncle deals with vicious dogs for a living, and she feels safer around his workplace than at our house. I many times have ended up needing to go to the doctors for the crime of sitting in the same room as my stepdaughter, and having her attempt to pound my head in, throw a heavy object at me, or trying to choke me after I had fallen asleep. My late wife was the only one who could reliably calm her down. When we started using caregivers for my stepdaughter after my wife was diagnosed, they would be asking me whether I could enlighten them on a better way to explain things to my stepdaughter when she was going ballistic. When even they, who were used to explaining things to people who just didn't get things, were still struggling and asking for insight. When my late wife was diagnosed, the first word out of her mouth was my stepdaughter's name. She cried every day for what was to become of her. In her desperation, she tried to press the doctor for chemotherapy when it no longer made sense. Turned to alternative medicine despite it making her feel worse. Saying she would have stopped all treatment if she was only leaving behind an employable, functioning 30-year-old. On her deathbed, she made me promise to not let her fall into the hands of a state care facility. I promised her, because I didn't have the heart not to. But now, after my grief fog has cleared 2 months later, my stepdaughter remains the same. She doesn't understand her mom is dead, only that she's gone, and is angry at me for it. Saying she'll be good, so bring her back. Caregivers are expensive. I don't make much. I didn't resent any medical expenses when it was my wife, but I admit that I resent my stepdaughter. My own grown kids won't visit with her around. If I hadn't made the deathbed promise, the decision would have been easy. And finally I made the decision that I needed to put her in a state-run facility, as even with my wife leaving me everything, I couldn't afford anything better. Now my family is calling me the evil stepdad and a mother's worst nightmare. I feel so bad, but I just can't take it anymore.
Am I the a-hole for refusing to give my sister a kidney because of how she used to treat me? The title might make me sound heartless, but I feel like I shouldn't be expected to just forgive and forget so easily. I'm 21 years old and I have one older sister who is 28. We are each other's only siblings, and we had great parents growing up. My childhood would have been perfect if it hadn't been for my older sister. She tortured me until I was a teenager. Obviously, I am much younger than my sister, and she took advantage of that. All I wanted as a kid was to hang out with her and connect, but she was always nasty to me and telling me to leave her alone. She would be rough with me often and call me names. I used to cry so much as a child because I felt so rejected by my sister. She was the first person who should have been my friend in life, but all she did was make me feel small and unwanted. I would be so jealous and confused when I would see my friends getting along with their own siblings, and I think my sister's treatment of me affected me even into adulthood. Like I said, she used to push me around a bit, but she never was outright physically abusive to me. But still, she never showed me any sort of kindness or warmth when I was a young child, and I needed it most from her. Now as an adult, it's hard for me to make female friendships easily, and I live a pretty isolated life. When I grew up and moved out of my childhood home, I left with a lot of resentment for my sister, and it caused me to put distance between me and my family. I still saw them during holidays, but I stopped speaking to them on a regular basis within the first year of me being moved out of the house. It's caused problems since my mom calls me often just to see how I am and always complains that she misses me and wants me to come around. I just don't see the point. They still have a pretty strong relationship with my sister, and I want as little to do with her as possible. The problem started last week when I got a call from my sister out of the blue. This was extremely weird since my sister and I don't speak at all. I don't even have her number, and that's the only reason I answered. If I had known that she was calling me, I would have thrown my phone against the wall before I answered. Anyway, she blindsided me and immediately started going into a rant over the phone about how she was dealing with some severe medical issues and she needed my help. I listened to her at first, since it did sound important, and my sister and I ended up coming straight out and asking me if I would donate one of my kidneys to her. She said that everyone in the family had been tested and nobody was a match, and that the doctor said that I was most likely to be a match. She begged me to come to her hospital and take the donor test to see if my kidneys were a match. I honestly was completely astonished. I couldn't believe my sister had spent a lifetime treating me like total garbage just to turn around and ask me for a literal part of my body. I didn't answer her for a couple of moments, and she kept saying my name, thinking that maybe I had hung up the phone. I finally told her that she had never been there for me and there was no reason for me to be there for her right now. My sister apologized for how she treated me as a child, and she said that she knew she should have been a better older sister to me, but there was nothing she could do about it now. She said that if I did this for her, she would spend the rest of her life making it up to me, and that she wishes she could take away all of the pain she ever caused me. My sister had never spoken to me this way, and hearing her cry almost made me cry as well. Even though it was a really emotional conversation, I still don't know if I can actually go through with something like that. What if I get sick later on in my life and only having one kidney eventually kills me? I would have ended my life early just so my sister could keep living hers. At the end of the day, I'm just so angry at her, and I don't see how I could do this for her when she's never done a damn thing for me in her life. My sister told me that without a kidney, she'll die within 3 months. I don't know if I can live with the pressure of her death on my shoulders either. I only have a certain amount of time to make this choice, and I have no idea what I'm going to do.
Parents of Reddit, what is most effed up secret you are hiding from your children? I'm the child, but my dad waited till I'm grown up to tell me that my mom gave me a lot of sleeping pills when I was a little child so she could leave me alone at home to maintain her relationship with her lover while my dad was working in another country. That cleared up many things. That I don't actually enjoy watching Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. My 2-year-old would be devastated because that's our show. I never actually took his nose, it stayed on his face the whole time. In fact, it has never once left his face, even though I have told him that I took it countless times. I even showed him the tip of my thumb as evidence of the theft. Sorry you had to read that, but it feels really good to come clean. My son was planned, but after separating from his father when my son was 8 months old and having basically nowhere to go, no way to actually take care of us on our own. Many times I thought about the possibility of dropping him off at the hospital and skipping town. I never did, and he is 8 now and we are very happy.
My husband's anger issues are affecting our kids more than I thought they would. My 11-year-old daughter's words broke my heart today. While teary-eyed, she asked, "How can you still be in love with someone like that?" Referring to her dad. Then she started crying. My son, 9, was sitting across from her and started crying too. This is right after my husband came out of the hallway looking and acting very angry with a wooden paddle and seeing the baby had changed the channel from the football game he was watching. My husband does have a slight temper. He has punched a hole through our bedroom door, replaced the door, and punched another hole. The kids saw this. I didn't realize how strongly the kids feel about his behavior. As far as tonight's episode goes, it didn't seem extreme to me. I understood he was stressed from work, our dog peeing and pooping everywhere, our AC being broken for a couple days, us suffering from heat, and so he used a wooden paddle on my daughter who was being way too loud playing video games in her room. When I told my husband the kids are scared of you, can you please apologize to them? He said good, mission accomplished. They should be scared of one of us. I don't know what to make of that. Was he being sarcastic or serious? This conversation happened while he was feeding the baby. The baby kicked his food and stuck his foot in the bowl. This caused my husband to slap the baby's leg. And it was a really hard slap. The baby started crying, of course. My husband actually left fingerprints and the skin bruised. When my son saw that, along with hearing him say good, he started crying. I asked my son if he wanted to write down what he was feeling since he wasn't able to voice it at the moment. He wrote down, "He always hurts the baby and hurts the dog and hurts us, and he never cares about us. He only cares about himself." I feel sad when I read that. I felt heartbroken for my son feeling this way, but also confused. I know my husband loves us, spends time with us. Overall, I thought he was a great dad. His anger has never been directed at us. He doesn't always hurt the baby. This was maybe the 3rd time. Since I was a little confused, I asked my son what he meant by doesn't care about us. My son said Dad makes jokes when we feel sad or are hurt. I don't know what to do. My kids are wondering why I'm still with my husband. I feel like my head was buried in the sand. How did I not notice their feelings? I thought we have an amazing and loving family. I know my husband won't go to therapy because if I've ever mentioned it in the past, he's just rolled his eyes. I'm honestly scared of putting my kids in therapy because of what they'll say. There is no physical mistreatment in my eyes, but the way my son views it, it seems like it's very extreme.
What's a red flag that you ignored in a significant other, only to realize it was a big deal later? Before having sex, I always ask my boyfriends to get an STD check. Sometimes I ask in the beginning, months before I chose to have sex with them, if getting tested is a problem. All have said they'll get tested, except one. He became extremely angry, he had a fit, he didn't talk to me for 2 days. He made it seem as if I was accusing him of having something. He yelled, "You don't trust me." Several times. I told him, it's not going to work out if you'll get this angry over this. The day after I told him that, he said he'll get tested. A few weeks later, he said he was tested and everything is clear. I didn't push him to see the test, I trusted him to be honest. He gave me genital warts and chlamydia. He didn't show any signs of an STD, no bumps, no leakage, no smell, etc. I was pissed, I wasn't even 21 yet. Having an STD that is forever in your system, HPV, feels like a scarlet letter. Even if your immune system takes care of it and eventually you don't have breakouts or are infectious. The thing is, it can decide to reappear at any time. Since then I refuse to be with a person who won't get tested and I always use condoms 100% of the time. I try to educate my partners on HPV also. So far, 2 boyfriends had an STD and had no idea because they were asymptomatic. People fail to realize it isn't about trusting you, it's about trusting everyone you had sex with and the people they had sex with also. If you don't trust your current partner's ex, then why wouldn't you get tested? I just recently asked my new boyfriend to get tested. He said the same thing, you don't trust me, I responded, I don't trust your ex-girlfriends and the men they had sex with. Do you trust their ex-boyfriends? He then told me he would get tested. I'm definitely asking for proof. I told a girl she turned me gay, she didn't take it lightly. To clarify, I'm a bisexual guy. There's a Barnes & Noble that I go to semi-regularly. There's also a cute girl that works there, Megan, that I had a crush on years ago. We liked the same books and had a few polite conversations here and here. One day I worked up the courage to ask her out and she gave me her number. But a few days later she let me down easily and I didn't go back to that Barnes & Noble for a while. After the awkwardness wore off I would go back and we'd be polite, but there was a bit of tension there, at least I thought so anyway. Fast forward a few years and I'm married to my wonderful husband, and Megan still works at the Barnes & Noble. I go with my husband to the Barnes & Noble and Megan is there. She was busy so I don't try to have a conversation with her. My husband was looking around on the other side of the store and I was in the manga section, don't judge. I round a corner and almost bump into Megan. I apologize and we both laugh and have small talk and talk about one of the new books Sarah J. Maas is coming out with in January. At some point she notices my ring and says congratulations and I say, thank you. And this is how that conversation goes. I hope she makes you happy, I hear marriage is tough. He does make me happy, we've only been married a few weeks, dating for a year and things have been smooth. She looks at me confused. He? And here's my mess up. I decided to be funny and say, yeah, when you rejected me I thought I'd have more luck on the guy's side, and I was right, so thank you for turning me gay. I laughed hoping she'd get the sarcasm in my voice but she didn't. She turned red in the face and tears welled up in her eyes, then she apologized and pretty much ran away into a side room before I could tell her I was joking. I wanted to wait for her to come out so I could apologize for the joke, but after 15 minutes I didn't think she was coming out. I found my husband and made a hasty retreat to the car and told him what happened. He laughed and called me a monster jokingly. I may need to find a new bookstore. You can invent a disease that doesn't hurt anybody, only pisses them off. What are you coming up with? A disease where the person constantly has the sensation that there is a single hair in their mouth at all times. A disease where you constantly feel like you are about to sneeze but nothing happens. You always have an erection, but as soon as you get aroused by something, you get soft. Shartitis, never being able to tell the difference between a fart or permanent diarrhea. Whenever you're awake you can only breathe consciously. My nasty for the streets friend framed me. She's trying to say I had an affair with her husband. My life will be ruined if everyone finds out. I, 38, will try to keep this short. I've been friends with Raven, 34, and her husband Zach for over 10 years. I'm much closer to Raven, but Zach has always been in the picture. He's always been a pretty nice but quiet guy and we got along fine but weren't super close. It was just more of a female friendship if you know what I mean. In April, Raven confided in me that she was having an intimate affair with a married man, Nathan, 38, a married man who she works with. If that wasn't bad enough, Raven is Nathan's supervisor and she would lose her job if the affair was outed because it violates the company code of conduct. I never pumped her for info about the affair, but Raven was all too gleeful to share that she is in love with Nathan and he's the best, greatest, smartest, coolest, hottest male that she has ever met, in her opinion only, obviously. Truth be told, I've met Nathan and I strongly dislike him. Raven has told a few other friends in our circle as well, however I am pretty sure I'm the only person she sent verifiable proof to, which leaves me as the only person who could prove the affair was happening, as far as I know at least. Well, Raven is a bit of a talker and apparently she has talked so much about amazing Nathan at home that lo and behold, Zach got suspicious and asked her if she was having an emotional affair with Nathan. Raven flipped out and in retaliation, I assume, she is now telling everyone who will listen that Zach is having an affair with me. This is clearly false, and I've offered to give her all of our text messages, there are hardly any, take a lie detector, anything she wants. Her response, to me, is that she knows we aren't having an affair and that she just didn't like Zach talking to me and that accusing him of having an affair with me was the only way to make sure he was too scared to talk to me. She is clearly paranoid that I'm going to tell Zach that her affair with Nathan is actually an intimate affair or show him the documentation and photos she sent to me. I wasn't planning on getting involved in all this, as it is their private marital business. However, in the last few days I have had people that I barely know from our town ask me if I'm having an affair with Zach and forwarding me screenshots of messages they received from Raven telling them I'm a homewrecker. I cannot for the life of me understand why she is running a smear campaign against me. I'm a local business owner, and this could affect my livelihood. If I was reactive, I could easily out the affair to Zach and destroy her career. I don't want to do that, because I don't want to get sucked into her madness and I don't take ruining a person's career lightly, especially when they have a family to provide for. But I'm at an absolute loss at how to confront this. I don't want her smear campaign to reach my family, affect my kids at school, or affect my business. I've told my partner, and he knows she is lying. He has never liked Raven anyway, but he too is struggling with how to handle it. Her smear campaign is just a lie, and she admitted it to me in writing. I'm just flabbergasted. My nasty for the streets friend framed me. My partner and I met with Zach at a coffee shop. I hadn't seen him in a while and he looked awful, like he had lost weight and hasn't slept for a month. We bought him a latte and a sandwich and told him I had some very difficult information to share with him. I told him point blank that Raven is having an intimate affair with Nathan and every detail I knew about it. I gave him my phone and let him read through the texts, as well as share the screenshots Raven sent me of her conversations with Nathan about the sordid details of their affair and hot pics they took together. I apologized to him for not telling him sooner, as that was inexcusable. I thought Zach would be upset or distraught, but he seemed relieved. He teared up and thanked me for telling him, but it really seemed like a weight was lifted from him. I told him I would download the full conversation and all the screenshots and give it to him on a flash drive, so he can decide what to do with them. He kept repeating I knew it wasn't me. Zach then played a recording from the security camera in their garage that picked up a conversation as he was trying to leave the house and she was standing behind his car to block him in. I didn't even recognize the person in that video. She was crazed, throwing things at him, calling him an insane person, talking about how their son is on the spectrum because of Zach's weak, inferior gene pool, and screaming at him about how it's his fault that I cut off contact with her and she lost her best friend. At the conclusion of the video, she started kicking at him, and he just backed away to avoid it. I was dumbfounded. I had no idea she was like that behind closed doors. He said she has gotten worse lately, but she has always had an issue with rage. I am sick to my stomach. I told him that my partner and I have his back, whatever his needs are. He said he is calling a divorce lawyer and moving forward. As for me, I blocked Raven on all platforms, and I sent the texts in which she acknowledges that she knows her smear campaign is a lie to the people who have reached out to me. I sent the same screenshots to my lawyer, who will be sending her a cease and desist letter with the text chain attached telling her to stop her smear campaign, and that I will be forwarding her statements to every single person who I learn was told this lie. I hope like crazy that she doesn't double down and come for me, but I am ready if she does. When we left the coffee shop, Zach gave me a hug. The irony of this entire thing is that it is the first time I think I've ever even touched the guy, yet here I am defending an accusation that I had a full-blown affair with him.
My mother-in-law posted on Facebook that her baby is in danger and wants to claim guardianship because we are abusing my daughter, so I am suing her for defamation. My husband and I've been married for 2 years. Honestly, mother-in-law wasn't too bad at the beginning. She wasn't a super nice person, but my husband said she was always like this. She was always neutral when it came to me, not happy, not sad, not mad. This changed when I got pregnant. It also was when we had moved a few states away. This was not planned. We weren't trying to get pregnant and my job sent me to live in Washington, so we moved there and then I found out I was pregnant. Husband and I were elated, and with my new job and savings I have been building, we decided to keep the baby. We told his family after the second trimester since I have a heart condition and some other chronic illnesses that made the first trimester difficult for me. It was emotionally and physically tiring and I was constantly terrified of losing the baby. But we made it and my doctors felt more confident, so we told our families over FaceTime. My husband's family was ecstatic. This would be their first grandchild. Father-in-law especially was excited. He's the sweetest man. But mother-in-law, for the first time, shared her own opinion. She didn't like it. She said, if you knew you were having a baby, why did you move so far away? She accused me to moving closer to my family so that I would cut off my husband's family. My husband told her that we didn't know about the pregnancy when we moved. It just happened at the same time. It put a bit of a damper on the mood of the FaceTime and we ended it early. Husband and I were both shocked at mother-in-law's behavior, but brushed it off. Again, she never did anything drastic to make me think she hated me or anything. Over the next week she sent us email after email about houses back in our old state, trying to get us to move back. Husband told her many times we can't move, my job is here, and I have to be in person 4 days a week. We had found a wonderful house, and even though we weren't planning on having any children yet, this house is perfect for us. Mother-in-law then started sending houses/apartments to only my husband, 1 bed, 1 bath, telling him that he could get one of these and bring her baby to them while I work. What the actual hell? Husband shut that down super fast, saying his life was here now, and he wouldn't be moving back. This behavior went on, but we ignored it, especially when we found out the baby might have my same heart condition. I had to go into to do a fetal echocardiography to check, and the stress started to give me palpitations. I was kept in the hospital for a few days for observation and then sent home. My husband was my rock during this time. Words cannot explain how much this man made me feel safe and cared for. This is probably why he didn't tell me of mother-in-law's continuing behavior, which I don't blame him for. He also was working more, making sure our move-in was going okay, and dealing with the emotional stress of the whole pregnancy. During this time, mother-in-law started sending baby stuff to our house, all male-gendered, even though we told her we weren't going to do a gender reveal or anything. I think all of that stuff is tacky, and I'm not premeditating my baby's room or toys or clothes by their intimacy. Plus, the stuff she sent was ugly as hell anyway. Time went on and I got better. My baby will most likely have the same heart condition, but the doctor said that any care or treatment can wait until post-birth. They're not worried about it at this time. Mother-in-law started posting on Facebook how her baby was in danger because of my poor health and accused me of intentionally trying to ruin the baby's life. I'm not on Facebook and neither is my husband, so we didn't know about this. Well, my due date comes and goes and my baby doesn't want to come out, so I am induced into labor. People say you forget how bad childbirth is and I don't know when that happens, but I hope it's soon, because goddamn it was traumatizing. I won't go into detail, but both my husband and I were relieved when it was over. Because of my stay in the hospital, she knew which location I would be giving birth at. Once she knew I was being induced into labor, she got on a plane and showed up to our house. She called my husband over and over again, but he never answered cause he was busy becoming a father. That's when she showed up to the hospital at 3 in the morning looking for us. Luckily she wasn't able to get into our area because we were close to the NICU and there is extra security there. She called my husband again and when he answered she started yelling at him, telling him that she missed the birth of her baby, and that she would never forgive me for this. She did not me ruin, she was in the hospital. My husband was exhausted and just told her he'd call her back later. My husband went downstairs to get coffee and saw her. She demanding to see the baby, and when he said no, she freaked out again, claiming I was breaking the family apart. She said I purposefully got pregnant as we moved, so I trapped us in Washington, and basically unloaded all her thoughts and opinions about me throughout our entire relationship. Husband told her to go home and that he'll talk to her later. I had a girl, and both my husband and I love her so much. We got our own supplies and clothes, and we donated the stuff mother-in-law bought us. We both stayed in the hospital 2 weeks. In that time, mother-in-law posted on Facebook like it was her job. She found pictures of babies with a different ethnicity and posted them, not saying outright that I cheated on my husband but letting other people think that. When my husband and I took our baby girl home, that's when everything caught up to us. One of mother-in-law's posts went viral, where she was asking for advice on how to claim guardianship of a grandchild if they are being abused by their parents. Legit lawyers commented on links and messaged her. People asked for our address to call CPS. Once they researched her profile page, they found my husband and I. They found his work, my family. My family's business Yelp reviews tanked, and the police did end up coming to our home. I had been home from the hospital for 4 days. I had only had 4 days with my baby. My husband dealt with everything. My cousin is a counselor for an attorney and is going to help us file a lawsuit against her for defamation. I am so exhausted and overwhelmed by this information. I'm in therapy, mental and physical. My therapist said it's good to write down what happened and how I'm feeling. I don't even know if I'll post this or for how long it'll be able to stay up. I love my husband. I love my baby, but this entire experience has made me so depressed. I don't know why she did this. I don't know what changed. My husband was equally pissed at her. He sent her a message that under no circumstance is she allowed to meet my daughter. According to my husband, she was bombarding him with calls and messages crying. She's saying that we forced her to do this, which he shut down and said that this was all her fault. Right now, I just want to relax and take care of my baby.
What was a mess that could have gotten you in jail? I got into a random car thinking it was my Lyft. I was heading out to attend a basketball game and called for a lift to get to the arena. I saw that my Lyft had arrived and I saw it was a white SUV. I walked out of my apartment building and saw a white SUV parked right out in front. I did not think twice and proceeded to get into the car. I moved over whatever was on the seat, leftover food? And he began to drive without saying a word. I thought it was a little strange, but did not think too much of it. I then got a notification that I was charged a $5 cancellation fee from Lyft. Okay, now this is weird. I came to notice we were going the wrong way too, so I asked the driver, "Hey, you're going to blank arena, right?" This was the first time he turned around and said anything. He looked me in the eyes and said, "Oh poop, you're not Peter." He then proceeded to get very upset, I don't know why, and he unlocked his doors and screamed, "Get the F out of my car." I was in shock and was also a little scared, so, I was left out in the middle of an unfamiliar part of the city, and I ended up missing half of the game. But I did get into the correct lift this time. Moral of the story, make sure you are actually getting into your lift when you think you are getting into your lift. I've been told to change one student's grade, so why don't I change them all? I moved to a new state to take a high school teaching job in a rural town. I liked my fellow teachers and almost all my students, but this was a small town with the usual assortment of outsized attitudes. One student was particularly lazy. Her parents both worked in the small school district, admin at the HS, teacher at the MS. She rarely turned anything in on time, and what was turned in was generally rushed or incomplete as if she'd gotten the instructions secondhand. Somehow, though, she had straight A's in all of her classes. I quickly figured out why. When she turned in another late, incomplete assignment, and I very generously gave it a D, her overall grade in class dropped to a B. I was called in the next day to a meeting with the principal and both of her parents, who immediately complained I was being unfair and capricious with my grades. They accused me of not giving students the instructions, so I showed them the instruction paper which I passed out and went over in class. They accused me of not giving her specifically a copy, but I remember handing it to her and I told them why. She was making out with her boyfriend when I was trying to go over the instructions. They didn't like hearing that part, lol. They accused me of not being clear with the due date, but it was the second line of the directions. They accused me of not fairly grading her work, but when I showed them her work, they clearly hadn't seen it before and wondered whether I'd gotten assignments mixed up before I showed them her name on it. The principal asked me to change the grade in the gradebook. I asked about whether she'd have to redo the assignment first, but that was declined by her parents. I understand why my principal caved. It wasn't worth trying to fight two employees in a small, rural district already struggling to recruit people. So I went back to my classroom and changed every student's grade to a 100 in the gradebook. No special treatment. Even the ones who hadn't turned in a single thing got a perfect score. The fallout of this gets a bit more funnier. Many students asked me why their grade changed, but I never addressed it. I would just brush them off by saying not to worry about it, though clearly rumors were spreading like wildfire in the small school, because even the secretary and the principal asked me about it later on. I only said that yes, I changed her grade. The principal looked like he wanted to ask me about why I changed all the grades, but he just shrugged and walked away. He never interfered in my grade book after that. The student's parents transferred her out of my class and her boyfriend also transferred a day later. No more PDAs in my class, finally, so no complaints. I catfished my stalker and ruined her life. Years ago my boyfriend and I were in a rocky relationship. We argued a lot, drank excessively, and treated each other poorly. We both decided to join a dating site in an attempt to find happiness elsewhere. However, we sat down and had a heart-to-heart conversation about what was wrong in our relationship and decided to try and fix it. On the dating site my partner was chatting with another woman. He was open about it, and I trusted him completely. But this woman started texting him in an obsessive manner every single day, becoming overly pushy and intrusive, cracking many jokes about me and becoming borderline threatening towards me specifically. My partner felt uncomfortable, so he told me he wanted to stop talking to her. I supported his decision. Despite his decision, she continued texting him the following week. She even sent him tickets for a concert he loved, along with a message that set off alarm bells for me. I decided to message her and tell her that her actions were inappropriate. I tried to be understanding of her feelings, but she didn't take kindly to my message. Instead of continuing to message my partner, she began sending me abusive messages, threats, and insults every weekend. She claimed that my partner loved her and that he was cheating on me with her. She even said she was watching me and commented on my appearance. No matter how many accounts I blocked, she created new ones. I stayed resilient and didn't let her hurtful words get to me. This pattern of harassment continued for literal years, even after my boyfriend and I had a baby and were leading a happy, normal life, except for the constant intrusion by this stranger every weekend. It escalated to the point where she mentioned our child and threatened to come to our house, stating our address. We finally decided to involve the police. We provided them with all the messages, her name and her contact details, hoping they would put an end to this. When the police returned, they informed us that she lived with her fiancé and 2 teenage boys. Her behavior was highly unusual for someone with her seemingly stable life. So I did some investigating and discovered that she had been harassing me while being engaged for 15 years and having 2 kids of her own. We thought that the harassment would stop after involving the police, but it didn't. We only had about 3 weeks of peace before she messaged me directly, insulting my life and boasting about hers. At this point I had enough. I decided to message her and told her to leave us alone and focus on her own fiancé. She had no idea that we knew about her personal life, and that sent her into a frenzy. She began copying everything we did, especially on social media where I'm an Instagram blogger with a successful page. She contacted my friends, family, work and endorsement companies, spreading lies about my partner cheating with her. This pushed my partner to the edge, and he decided to call her. She didn't answer the call, but she messaged him, expressing her love and desire to be with him. My partner told her that he would file another police report, blocked her number again, and we hoped that would be the end of it. However, the very next night, the police showed up at our door. An anonymous report had been filed, claiming that I was on the receiving end of domestic abuse. I was beyond furious and showed the police all the messages she had sent. They believed us and said they would issue her a second warning. I was exhausted after enduring this torment for nearly 4 years. I just wanted it all to stop. So I decided to do something completely out of character. With a friend's permission, I used his photos to create a fake account, pretending to be him. I spent a week making the account look genuine and then added her as a friend. I began interacting with her, being friendly, and she started opening up about her life. She confided in me about her unhappiness in her relationship, feeling insecure, and not truly in love with her fiancé. It became clear that she was projecting her own issues onto me. She sent inappropriate photos and messages, which I saved. Eventually, I revealed my true identity and advised her to work on herself. She responded with insults, but then she disappeared. For a while, things seemed quiet. But one day, she reappeared in my personal messages, berating me, and claiming that my partner didn't love me and that I was ugly. She even sent explicit photos and messages, completely inappropriate for an engaged woman. She told this man she was attracted to him and wanted to have an affair. After a few more disturbing messages, I decided to shut down the fake account, saving the entire conversation. A day later, after I had returned to being myself on social media, I faced a barrage of verbal abuse, all directed at me and my kids. At that point, I'd had enough. I decided to take drastic action. I sent her all the evidence of everything I had uncovered and done. I told her that I felt sorry for her and that she needed to address her issues and be a better person, fiancé, and mother. I warned her that if she didn't change, I would expose everything to her partner. I expected her to lose control, but instead, she sent me a single message, calling me a loser, claiming she was better than me, expressing pity for me, and asserting that my partner loved me. Then she vanished. She deleted all her fake and real social media accounts. It's been a while now, and it's been peaceful without her.
I broke off my engagement because of what my fiancé said to my mom. When I was 5, my dad left the country with his mistress. We were really poor, so my mom worked as an intimacy worker to get food on the table. She put my brother and I through school to try and give us the best chance of a better life. My mom stopped when my brother and I were old enough to work. Fortunately, due to my mom's efforts, I got a scholarship to attend college. I met my fiancé, Javi, while studying. I never told Javi about my mom's past because she had me promise to never tell anyone. I kept the promise, but it felt wrong to keep this huge secret from my fiancé. A week ago, my mom and I went to Javi's house to meet his parents. I didn't realize his uncle and aunt would also be there. Upon seeing his uncle, my mom's face went as white as a ghost. His uncle also kept staring at my mom as if he knew her. My mom felt uncomfortable and insisted that we go home. Nonetheless, we left earlier than we anticipated. The next day, my hobby came to my family home. He looked enraged. It was quite frightening to see this side of him. He began shouting at the top of his lungs that I was a liar and he couldn't trust anything that came out of my mouth. I was confused until he called a gold digger just like my mother, and that she's the reason why his uncle's first marriage broke down. He said that his uncle knew my mom because he was a regular customer of hers and often hired her for her services. His wife caught them red-handed and immediately filed for divorce. My mom was crying and said that she didn't know he was married. She never asks men about their marital status. I told him that he has no right to speak to my mom like that and his uncle was fully to blame because he was a married man who was hiring intimacy workers. Hobby still blamed my mom and I, saying that he felt deceived and doesn't want to date an intimacy worker's daughter. His argument was that I will probably end up just like my mom since the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. My mom had to beg him to not break the engagement where he said he'd consider it. I gave him back his engagement ring and told him to never show his face here again. My mom is angry at me. She thinks this is my only chance to get married because no sane guy would marry into a family where the mom works was an intimacy worker. I am not ashamed of my mom. I didn't even want to hide it in the first place. I wanted to tell him the truth but my mom refused it. I broke off my engagement because of what my fiancé said to my mom. After I broke off the engagement, my phone didn't stop ringing with calls from my friends and Hobby's family telling me that I am making a huge mistake and that I can't do better than Hobby. Some have even been questioning if I ever did intimacy work. Hobby did call to apologize. He said he got carried away by his emotions and still loves me. I was weak for a moment thinking maybe we could make it work. Until he told me that he is only willing to let things go and start anew if my mom does not attend any wedding functions. He told me that because of my mom's past it would be difficult for his family members to be around her. He convinced his mom with difficulty about continuing our engagement and that I should just be happy that we can still get married. Also, since his uncle is going to be there, it will only remind him of bad things. At that moment I realized that I was never a consideration, that it was always him and making his family happy. My family is beneath them because we are not from a respectable background and come from an intimacy worker. I stood firm and told him that I wouldn't give in to their demands because my mom did nothing wrong. Hobby reminded me of the grave mistake I'm making by letting him go, so I just left. I messaged him later on to say that I am sorry for not telling him earlier about my mom, but I loved him a lot. I informed him I'd pay back the money he spent on my brother's education so we could just move on. The news is spreading like wildfire and I may even have to move out of the city, because if this news reaches my workplace they will ostracize me. I broke off my engagement because of what my fiancé said to my mom. The news of my mom's old profession did spread like a wildfire. Some of mine and Hobby's friends literally cut me off because they don't want to deal with an intimacy worker's kid. My real friends stuck with me. This impacted my brother a lot too. I knew living here would make things more difficult, so with my brother graduating soon I advised him to look for masters in a foreign country like in the USA or UK. Because of this whole fiasco, I, along with my mom, moved to a new city. I took a transfer for my work. My boss defended me and told my coworkers not to bother me about anything other than work. My personal life shouldn't be any of their business. She has been so supportive of my family and I, never questioning me or judging me. She transferred me to a different city on my request and even managed to find an apartment for my mom and I. She is like Michael Scott but mature. As for my ex, he is seeing another girl his parents set him up with. However, after only 2 months he called me to try and get me back. I had moments of weakness because I loved him so much, but the vile things he said about me and my family just played like a recorder. I am still trying to heal from everything, but now another bombshell has been dropped on us. My dad, who ran off with his mistress when I was 5, found me on Facebook. He messaged me to meet. I don't know who he thinks I am to forget those 20 years we struggled because he was a coward. The selfish snake is literally the reason my mom had to become an intimacy worker.
What is something that you are 99.99% sure happens to others, but you have not confirmed with anyone else from fear of being the only one? There are random spots on my body where I can pinch and feel a sensation, usually pain, but on a different spot of my body from where I'm pinching. For example, I pinched the skin on my hip bone and felt it on my collarbone. That if I get rid of a stuffed animal I'm hurting their feelings, as if they have emotions. I still have half of my stuffed animals and refuse to get rid of them because of this. How my ear randomly has a ringing sound, and I can't tell if it's always been there and I'm just now realizing it, or if it's from me slowly going deaf and that's the last time I will ever hear that tone.
I asked my girlfriend to come up with reasons why we might break up, and now I deeply regret it. My girlfriend and I were lying in bed last night, cuddling, when it dawned on me all of a sudden that none of my friends were in relationships anymore. All of them had broken up with their partners within the past few months, which was more or less the same length of time my girlfriend and I had been together. I shared this revelation with my GF mid-cuddle before asking her what I thought was a funny and harmless question at the time. I asked her what she thought would be the end of us and encouraged her to come up with ridiculous reasons only. Full disclosure, my girlfriend and I were both high during the inception of this mess up, so keep that in mind if some of our actions come across as somewhat random. Anyway, so as per my question, My girlfriend provided the following reasons that would cause our relationship to crumble. 1. If I stopped showering. 2. If during lovemaking I said, I'm gonna come ... 3. If I lived on the 13th floor. 4. If I psed at someone whose name I knew. 5. If I used a spoon to drink tea or coffee like it was medicine. 6. If I literally licked my thumb before turning to the next page of a book. 7. If I found out she had a toy replica of her ex's schlong. I paused my GF when she got to the 7th reason and asked her if number 7 was something real or ridiculous because it sounded a lot less random than the other reasons. My GF said it was both real and ridiculous while laughing because at that point the atmosphere in the room was still lighthearted. I asked her why she still had her ex's fake thingy in her possession. She shrugged and said it was a decent toy. I was about to ask her if she still used the toy, but she predicted my question and said it's been a long time since she used it. I think my face was beginning to show my mixed feelings because my GF decided to tickle me out of the blue until I laughed. I did laugh, thanks to the tickle, but I was unable to forget about the Clone a Willy situation. It was bugging me. I had to see it, so I asked my GF to show it to me. She reluctantly agreed to show it to me if I promised to file this whole situation under something that means nothing and move on. I promised. For someone who said she struggled to remember when she last used the toy, my GF didn't even have to think about where she stored it. Just in case it's unclear, we were in her flat. As soon as I witnessed the clone thingy with my own 2 eyes, I knew, oh yeah, that was gonna live rent-free in the back of my mind. Of course it was big. I mean, what other size is there when it comes to exes? My GF asked if I wanted her to get rid of it. My mind said yes, but my mouth said it was her choice. She shrugged and said it was just another toy. I said a promise as a promise before deciding to make us some coffee, which I drank with a spoon. Playing the breakup game was not the smartest decision on my part. Now I'm cursed with the knowledge that my GF not only kept her ex's clone thingy, but most likely used it whenever she wanted, which may or may not have been during our relationship. What do people pretend is in the Bible but is absolutely not in the Bible? I've never been much of a religious person. In fact, the last time I stepped foot in a church was when I was dragged to Sunday school as a kid. But it still amazes me how people can twist and turn the Bible to fit their own agendas. One thing that really grinds my gears is how some people pretend that the Bible tells us to love our jobs no matter what, as if we're supposed to be these mindless drones, clocking in and out every day without a single complaint. Well, let me tell you, that's a load of crap. I used to work at this job that made me want to escape every single day. It was like being assailed by a never-ending stream of stress and deadlines. I was miserable, but according to some people, I should have just sucked it up and thanked the Lord for the opportunity to work. F that. I'm not going to pretend I love something that makes me feel like poop. I believe we should strive to find work that makes us happy, that challenges us in all the right ways. And the Bible? It doesn't say a damn thing about settling for a job that drains your soul and makes you hate your life. So, if you're in a job that makes you want to escape, don't let anyone tell you that you should be happy to be there. You deserve better than that. Find something that makes you want to jump out of bed in the morning, that inspires you to be the best damn version of yourself you can be. And don't let anyone use the Bible to guilt trip you into thinking otherwise. Ida for making a customer cry? I work in photo finishing and I was helping a friendly lady who wanted prints off of her phone. She mentioned that she recently lost all the photos on her phone, so she has to get pictures from the last few weeks printed, in case they disappear again. I found it odd that the photos would just disappear but the phone was still working. She insisted, despite being a technology illiterate, she wasn't stupid enough to accidentally delete them. She also said that her phone had a memory card in it. I checked the phone and took the SD card. I put the card into one computer, and it didn't show up at all. So I tried our Windows PC instead and it told me the disk was unformatted. Her cheap off-brand Android SD card literally corrupted the disk. At this point I was pretty sure the pictures were gone, but I didn't want to crush her hopes yet. Since Windows was able to see it, I thought there might be a chance. So I took a deep breath, formatted the disk and threw it into our recovery software. To my surprise, not only did it work, I was able to recover 90% of the photos and video on that card. The lady had been waiting for her prints, so I waved for her to come around to my computer and take a look. She looked at the photos on the screen and literally started bawling. Like full-on ugly cry. It was all her most important pics. Her grandson's grand, her dog that had passed away a few months ago, family trips, years worth of pics that weren't backed up anywhere besides in this card. In the end, she bought a new micro SD and I gave her a DVD of the pics at no charge. After paying, she ran behind the counter and gave me a big hug. Today, she came in again with a handwritten letter and a little cake from one of the best bakeries in town. She said I was the best customer service she'd ever had. I'm home now enjoying the cake. Today has been a good day.
Older siblings, what's the sweetest thing you did for a younger sibling that they'll never know about? So my family usually opens presents on Christmas morning around 8 a.m., but due to my mother working this year, we had to start at 6:30. Now, my brother and I are of age and old enough to understand the Santa process. However, we have a younger sister, Katie, who still fully believes. She did the list, put out the cookies, and so on. The main thing she wanted this Christmas and last year was a Nintendo Switch. I don't know much about it other than it's expensive and could make a child's Christmas wish come true. So it comes midnight, and my mother and I are wrapping up the presents for everyone while they're asleep. We're checking off the list to make sure nothing was forgotten. But then we come across the Nintendo on the list. My mom asks me where it is, and I have no clue. I go up and ask my dad, and he has no clue. Everyone in my family, no clue. We all begin scrounging the house, top to bottom. Every corner, every drawer, every hiding spot. Even the vents? Time passes, we're still looking, it's 2 in the morning. We should have been asleep an hour ago. My mother has to wake up in 4 hours to get ready for a full day of work and be with us for presents. She's crying, my dad's pissed, and I'm nervous. I send my parents up to bed and tell them to leave it up to me. Still don't know why I said this. But I stay up, still looking. It's now 4 a.m. I'm ready to pass out. I decide to write the letter from Santa myself, stating the following. Dear Katie, I hit a major storm in the middle of the night and lost Dasher and 60% of my presents. Expect a delivery from the elves within the next few days. So I'm looking up what stores I can buy this Nintendo Switch again. Of course, they're all closed at 4 a.m., but they're closed all day for Christmas too. Now I'm bugging. I decide to let the note do its magic and pray I can find a Nintendo Switch to buy again. Christmas morning comes along and she reads the note. She starts freaking out that Santa even made it in such a bad storm. But she's also freaking out that Dasher is on the loose. I try to calm her down. She keeps screaming and panicking that Santa can't fly without all his reindeer and is probably missing. Finally, we open the rest of the presents. We left the Switch game wrapped, and she opened it. Gave it away instantly. Now I'm frustrated that we were so unprepared. This is supposed to be a huge gift. We finish up presents and my mom goes to work. At this point my sister is playing with her stuff, and I'm checking out my new bling. Then I remember that my polish for jewelry was in the trunk of the car. I open up the trunk, and there it is. The Nintendo Switch. Sitting right there. Staring at me. I start crying tears of joy. I don't have to spend another $300 on a console and games. I wrap it instantly and leave it on the front bench. I go upstairs, play the sound of a hoofing horse from my speaker, and make a loud bang. When I sneak back downstairs my sister asks, "What was that?" I tell her, "I don't know, it sounded like it came from outside." "Want me to check?" "Sis. It's Dasher. It has to be. He has it." She runs as fast as I've ever seen her run down the stairs and whips the door open. Finally, she falls upon the gift wrapped up on the bench. She grabs it and runs inside. When she opens it, she cries. Santa really does listen. And then I cried. Again. Because I was so relieved it was over. All in all, she was happy and I was happy. My parents were pissed they left it somewhere so stupid, but in the end Christmas was even more fun for my sister.
What is something you want to get off your chest? I'm a 21-year-old female. I belong to a country where people worship a female idol in temples but do not want any in their home. I live in a big joint family. My father is the only person in our family who has daughters and all of my uncles and aunts have sons. I'm the third girl to my parents. Recently, one of my sisters-in-law got pregnant. It was an unwanted pregnancy. She already has 2 daughters, so this was not what she wanted. My aunt, her mother-in-law, was furious and pressured her to go through sex determination tests. Everyone, my uncle, aunt and some relatives who just want to put their nose in others' business, were furious as she was already 5 months pregnant. It is very dangerous to have abortion at this time. But the main concern was, what if it is a girl, third girl? One day my mother and my aunt were talking about abortion and I was sleeping in the same room. I heard my aunt saying we will only have this child if it's a boy and I was listening to everything. I got so mad that I told her that if anyone goes to a doctor and by chance if he or she agrees on telling about the seconds of the child, I'll call MCI Medical Council of India, who may further take strict action against the doctor and my aunt. My aunt heard all of it and told me you were also born by mistake. Your mother never wanted you but there was nothing she could have done to prevent that. It hit me so hard. Everything I knew came down into pieces. I was numb. All I could think of was how I may have ruined my parents' life. Whatever bad ever happened to them was all my fault. I didn't talk to anyone for days. Now whenever I see my parents all I could feel is pain. I'm scared for life. So to all the people out there, I humbly request you to conceive only if you want a child irrespective of its gender. Am I the jerk for pointing out that it's not my wife's natural hair? So my wife has always had straightish but kind of messy hair. Lately she's been doing all sorts of stuff to it and embracing her curls as she says. I'm not exaggerating when I say she probably spends an hour working on it every time she showers and fixes it constantly throughout the day. Anyways, she keeps getting a lot of compliments on her curls and when people ask how she gets them to look so natural she says it's her natural hair. Well, the other day we ran into my friends at the store, and I was introducing them. My friend's wife mentioned how much she loved her hair and how she can never get hers to hold curls and asked for advice on how she gets hers to look so curly. My wife, like usual, said, "Oh, it's my natural hair." And my friend's wife was telling her how jealous she was and how she wishes she could have curls like that. Well, it kind of annoyed me because, well, that's not her natural hair. She spends a good hour every time she showers on it and constantly messes with it and puts a ton of product in it, to the point where I can taste it sometimes if it's in my face. So I said, "Well, I mean that's not really your natural hair, but okay." She kind of paused and gave me a look, and said, "I mean I do have naturally curly hair, so." My friends looked kind of awkward for a minute and said, "Well, time to head out, nice seeing you," and left. Well, the second we got to the car she went off on me and yelled at me for embarrassing her. We got in a big fight about it and I told her I just think it's weird of her to always say her hair is naturally curly instead of just giving them advice on how she gets it like that, and at the very least she could have told my friend's wife that it's not like she was talking to some stranger. She got even more pissed and said it was her natural hair and then we started to argue about if it was or not. Now she's not really talking to me. Am I the jerk here? My wife left me after she got in shape and said that she could do much better than me. Now she regrets everything and calls me non-stop. I was married to my wife for 4 years and we had a great marriage so far. I was madly in love with my wife. She fell into depression mainly due to her job in 2022. I tried to support her in every way and suggested her going to gym or doing any kind of sports to de-stress. I had my own depression episode before we got married and what saved me was going to gym. She agreed to that and we started going there together. I could not go as frequent as in the past since my workload got heavier after my promotion. However, I tried my best to be there with her. She used to be a bit chubby, which I loved, and after seeing some changes with her body, she started to go there regularly. It also helped her with depression and she got better. I was really happy to see her get better and livelier. She looked more confident, got more aggressive in bed and so on. However, after a while that confidence level started to affect our relationship for worse. She started going to the parties and going outside to a point she completely stopped doing her share in the house. That proceeded with me seeing her getting flirty with a guy at a meetup we went. I communicated my feelings to her and she dismissed these. After several of these, I had her sit down with me and told her that she is riding high on her newly found confidence and emotions right now. I clearly stated she should not make decisions or actions according to that confidence right now. I know it well. It was one of my worst traits. I used to be extremely emotionally driven in the past. I suggested we go to a marriage counselor and hell broke loose. She said vile things to me like how she realized she settled down with me after getting better and she could do much better than me. She said I am insecure and other things. This woman used to be sweetest person on the earth and I was shocked after hearing the things she said to me. She filed for divorce the following month and I did not hear much from her other than some lawyer talks. Our court seeing is scheduled to be next month and my lawyer told me there is a high chance it'll be concluded then. There is not much to share. Similar income, only shared asset is our joint account, similar savings and no kids. House is my mom's so it's out of division. I accepted my marriage is going to end like that. Last week she called crying and told me she regrets everything. She apologized over and over again but I felt disappointed. Not angry, not sad but just disappointed. She did not text me nor call me even once since the divorce started. I did not even know where she was since she just left the home. I told her there is no going back now. She has been messaging me non-stop. My family supports my decision and tell me I should not back down. My in-laws were shocked when they heard about the divorce. They are now telling me to rethink everything. I will 99.9% not back down but as I said just looking for validation and maybe wanted to vent.
Women of Reddit, what are men not ready to hear? Fellas, if she slightly adjusts the angle of her pelvis while you're eating her out/touching her, don't move with her. She's lining up your shot for you. Anger is an emotion. If you're angry a lot or easily upset and people have to walk on eggshells around you, guess what? You're an emotional person. When a girl says no, please listen, don't beg until she says yes. Saying you are a nice guy is like a restaurant advertising they won't give you food poisoning. Foreplay is important because it's dry AF down there if you don't do anything. We complain cause we don't want to be in pain when having intercourse. Only respecting women you're attracted to isn't the same thing as respecting women. We don't really like it when you rev your effing engine, it's just loud as F and hurts my ears.
What can you learn from a bag of old letters purchased at a yard sale? I was rummaging through a yard sale when I stumbled upon a bag filled with letters from the 1940s to the 1960s. I was intrigued and started reading them, and what I found was heartbreaking. Two soldiers, best friends during World War II, had written these letters to each other. One soldier was stationed in Europe and had married before leaving, but his wife had gone off to work as a nurse on an army base so they hadn't consummated their marriage yet. He wrote about how much he missed her and how he couldn't wait to be reunited once the war ended. The other soldier was stationed in Asia and his girlfriend back home lived with her parents. He wanted to marry her when he got back but they were keeping it secret because of the fear of him dying or not getting any mail due to wartime conditions. Eventually she told him she was pregnant but reassured him that she still loved him despite their unwed status. Unfortunately both soldiers died in battle, never getting the chance for their happily ever afters or meeting their children who were born after they died. It made me so effing angry that these brave men never got what they deserved, so I decided then and there that instead of throwing out those letters like I originally planned, I would find their families and deliver them personally as a way of honoring them for all they sacrificed for us during wartime. So far I've been able to locate both men's widows who only had each other after losing their husbands, plus 2 out of 4 children, 1 son from each soldier, although 1 son is still missing in action, which worries me deeply about his safety. Reading those letters has been an incredible experience. It's allowed me to bridge generations together by uncovering stories that would have otherwise remained untold forever if it weren't for those letters. Here are some photos of the people involved: the daughter of the Asian soldier, the son of the European soldier, the daughter of the European soldier, the son of the Asian soldier.
Bodybuilders, what's the worst thing that's happened to you at the gym? This happened to me when I was still a beginner bodybuilder. I just got one of those cute, tight bodysuits I see girls on Instagram wear all the time. It was my first time buying one and I thought it fit me great. The lady at the store even complimented me, saying I looked so snatched in my bodysuit. I confidently wore it to the gym the next day. Everything was going great. I was completing my sets while continuously adding more weight to them. I felt so strong and powerful. Even though it wasn't leg day, I was on a roll and felt very energetic. So, I started doing some leg lifts. Everything was going great until I felt the top of my bodysuit sliding down. I didn't want to stop my set midway, so I thought if I ignored it, it would stop sliding down. But then I felt a breeze. I looked down and my entire breast is out. Some of the guys in the gym started whistling. I immediately felt embarrassed and stopped my set to fix my bodysuit. I then felt something warm and wet on my seat. I was confused as to why my seat was warm and wet, but I figured it was just sweat. That was until I heard someone say, "Ew, what's that smell?" I then gave one big whiff. I lowered my face to the left side of my body and knew exactly what that smell was. It was the smell of pure and utter poop, and it was coming from me. I calmly got out of my seat, took my towel, and swept the seat with it. I flipped the towel only to see a gigantic smear of green poop. I threw the rag away, took my water bottle, and rushed into the locker room. There I saw it. A huge blob of poop all over my butt and back. I must have pooped myself out of embarrassment when I flashed everyone my breast. I felt so disgusted. I was going to take a shower in the locker room but noticed I didn't bring any extra clothes. So I took the hoodie that was in my bag, wrapped it around my waist, and did the walk of shame back to my car. As I was exiting the gym, I heard one of the janitors telling a worker that someone pooped on one of the machines and just left it there. I was so embarrassed and red in the face. I felt eyes staring at me. That same night I canceled my membership with that gym. I haven't been back since.
Am I the a-hole for walking out of my girlfriend's birthday party after she called me a cheapskate for the gift I gave her? My girlfriend recently celebrated her birthday, and I wanted to make it special. I spent a lot of time thinking about what to get her and decided on a personalized photo album with pictures of our time together over the last few years. I also wrote her a heartfelt letter expressing my love for her and detailing how much she means to me. When it came time for her to open the gift, she did so in front of our friends and family at her party. I could tell she was underwhelmed, and she even made a face. Then she said, "Wow, this is it? You're such a cheapskate." In front of everyone. I was stunned and embarrassed. People laughed awkwardly, and I could see she was expecting something more expensive. I was hurt by her reaction, especially since I put so much thought and effort into the gift. After a few minutes, I quietly excused myself and left the party. I didn't want to cause a scene, but I couldn't shake the feeling of humiliation. My girlfriend later called me and said I overreacted by leaving the party and that it was all in good fun. She also accused me of not putting in any effort since the gift was not expensive. I told her I felt disrespected and that my feelings were hurt. Now I'm questioning whether I was wrong to leave the party. Am I the a-hole for walking out of my girlfriend's birthday party after she called me a cheapskate for the gift I gave her? My girlfriend keeps stealing my blanket at night. Did I overreact by hospitalizing her? I work a high-stress job and long hours, meaning sleep is crucial to my regular function every day. My girlfriend on the other hand works part-time and doesn't go to college, meaning she usually gets to sleep in. We live in the same house and share a bed. Recently, she has begun stealing my blanket at night. Even though the blanket is 100% big enough for the both of us, she, for some reason, keeps taking the blanket away from me in my sleep. I have tried talking to her about this problem and she tells me she is sorry and apologies, yet the next night she will go back to stealing my blanket. She knows I need my sleep, and she knows how stressful my job is. On top of that, I am not a person who is good at dealing with low sleep, and she knows that when my sleep quality and quantity is needed to perform at work. As a result of me not getting enough sleep, I have become agitated around the house, and have started snapping at her quite frequently. It's not something I'm too proud of, but she knows the issue stems from my lack of sleep. Last night was my breaking point. I asked her for the 100th time not to steal the blanket. She told me she wouldn't, and yet she did. I don't know what came over me, but I started wailing on her. It woke her up, and before she even realized it, I had managed to seriously injure her. I wasn't even fully aware of what I was doing nor what was happening, but I was so annoyed that my half-conscious brain decided the best course of action was to lay hands on her. She had to call her sister to take her to the hospital as my girlfriend is now scared of me. I get that what I did was probably wrong, but I feel as if she may deserve it for the amount of stress she has caused me by stealing my blanket.